Tonight a profound odyssey beckons, drawing listeners into the heart of ancient Greek adventures and the quiet, yet momentous depths of Jason's legendary voyage. It is an invitation to walk alongside heroes, to witness them in moments of both grand design and humble daily ritual, tying intricate knots on sun-drenched ship decks, grinding potent herbs in weathered stone bowls, and waiting with bated breath for favourable winds to stir under a canopy of starlit skies. As the world outside quiets, and the clamour of the day recedes like waves from a peaceful shore, a journey into myth and destiny is poised to unfold, charting the course of Jason's unforgettable quest. In an epoch when the world was a canvas of nascent wonders and every distant horizon promised uncharted mystery, the narrative transports its audience to the ancient Greek city of Iolcus. Here, the nascent morning sun stretches long, ethereal shadows across ancient stone courtyards, while the comforting aroma of baking bread subtly escapes from bustling kitchen fires, weaving through the crisp air. This is the precise crucible where the unfolding drama commences, not with an immediate thunderous clash of destiny, but with the subtle yet profound pressure of an age-old prophecy, and the quiet, transformative moment a young man begins to uncover his true fated identity. For the initial 20 years of his existence, the individual destined to be known as Jason remained unaware of his true heritage. One can only ponder the profound irony of a life spent traversing sun-dappled olive groves, assisting with the bountiful harvests and mastering the subtle art of interpreting weather patterns from shifting cloud formations, all while bearing a name that was, in essence, a carefully constructed alias. His genuine appellation, a secret burdened with immense consequence, was safeguarded, exchanged only in hushed tones between his parents during the profound stillness of the pre-dawn hours, long before even the earliest roosters stirred. The youth, universally recognized as Diomedes, resided with the venerable centaur Chiron, high upon Mount Pelion, a realm where the atmosphere was perpetually thin and invigoratingly clean, and each dawn was heralded by the rhythmic, gentle cadence of horses' hooves, echoing on the rugged, winding paths. Chiron, embodying a patience that only the truly immortal could possess, dedicated eons to his tutelage. He commanded an infinite expanse of time, meticulously instructing the young man in the precise art of stringing a bow, deciphering the celestial tapestry for navigation, and, perhaps most crucially, cultivating the profound discipline of deliberate thought before impulsive action. One might vividly imagine their structured daily existence, awakening before the first blush of sunrise to attend to the horses, dedicating extensive afternoons to the study of potent healing herbs flourishing in the verdant mountain meadows, and partaking in simple evening repasts of hearty barley porridge and tangy goat cheese, all while Chiron recounted epic sagas of legendary heroes who had graced the world before them. It was a life steeped in quietude, a serene sanctuary of predictable rhythms. Until the pivotal day a messenger appeared, his sandals caked with the dust of a hurried journey, bearing urgent tidings that would irrevocably alter the course of their tranquil world. The messenger's urgent discourse centered upon King Pelias, the reigning monarch in Iolcus, a man who was, unbeknownst to Jason, his very own uncle. For a considerable period, Pelias had been tormented by a relentless succession of disquieting dreams, the sort that wrench a man from the depths of sleep in the dead of night, leaving his heart hammering against his ribs and a clammy, cold sweat beading on his brow. Within these unsettling nocturnal visions, a solitary figure consistently materialized, a young man, conspicuously distinguished by the absence of one sandal, striding with undeniable purpose into the royal throne room, asserting a claim to what he declared was his rightful inheritance. One might reasonably question the profound significance attached to a single missing sandal, however. In the ancient world, the populace meticulously observed signs and omens with a gravity akin to modern-day weather forecasting. A lone, absent sandal was far more than a mere inconvenience. It was imbued with potent, prophetic meaning. Years prior, Peleus himself had sought counsel from the revered oracle at Delphi, and the pronouncement delivered by the priestess had been so chillingly precise it had churned his very gut. Guard yourself against a man who approaches you adorned with but one sandal, for he shall ultimately orchestrate your ruin. For 2 full decades, Peleus had maintained an unyielding, almost obsessive vigil, scrutinizing the footwear of every individual who darkened his palace doors or walked the streets of Iolcus. Every itinerant merchant, every melodious travelling bard, every diligent farmer arriving to render his taxes, each was met with the king's initial furtive glance downwards, a silent count of sandals. 2 sandals present signified safety, a momentary reprieve from dread. 1 sandal, however, signalled an immediate visceral surge of alarm. Yet the prophesied one-sandaled man had never materialized, and with each passing year, Peleus had gradually allowed himself a fragile sense of ease, beginning to entertain the dangerous notion that perhaps the oracle's pronouncement had been erroneous, or that fate, by some inexplicable grace, had been successfully circumvented. Concurrently, high above the anxious machinations of Iolcus, upon the serene slopes of Mount Pelion, Chiron was meticulously preparing Jason for a truth so profound it would irrevocably reconfigure his entire self-perception. The venerable centaur, though moving with a measured slowness in these later years, his ancient joints sometimes protesting with creaks like worn leather, possessed a mind that remained as incisive and keen as ever. He chose a particular quiet evening for this momentous disclosure, a time when the hearth fire had settled into a soft glow of embers, and the crisp night air carried the distinct, invigorating fragrance of pine needles, to finally reveal to Jason the true identity of his parents. Chiron elucidated that Jason's biological father was none other than Aeson, the legitimate and rightful sovereign of Iolcus. However, Aeson's ambitious and ruthless half-brother, Peleus, had seized the royal scepter through a combination of calculated cunning and overt intimidation, ultimately compelling Aeson into a desolate exile. Prior to his forced departure, Aeson had made the heart-wrenching decision to dispatch his infant son to be nurtured in absolute secrecy, safely beyond the grasping reach of Peleus. That very infant, carefully concealed under the assumed name Diomedes, was Jason himself, brought up to innocently believe he was merely one among the many students under the esteemed tutelage of the sagacious centaur. One can readily envision Jason, seated by the dwindling fire, struggling to assimilate this torrent of extraordinary information. The very bedrock of his self-perception was now in upheaval, a disorienting sensation akin to attempting to decipher a text by flickering candlelight, while an unseen hand relentlessly shifts the flame. He was, astonishingly, of royal lineage, A legitimate claim to a coveted throne now rested upon his shoulders, and somewhere, far down the mountain slopes, his true father, Aeson, surely lingered, likely consumed by the poignant uncertainty of whether his son still drew breath. With the dawn of the following morning, Jason commenced preparations for an arduous journey he had never once contemplated. Chiron, with his ancient wisdom and practiced hands, assisted in assembling the essential provisions: a sturdy leather satchel filled with sustenance, a meticulously oiled water skin guaranteed against leakage, and a robust cloak woven from the finest sheep's wool, promising warmth against the biting chill of countless nights beneath the open stars. Yet, of all the provisions, the most crucial gift bestowed by Chiron was a pair of exceptional sandals, well crafted, featuring resilient, thick soles and leather straps painstakingly treated to endure innumerable miles of demanding travel. The descent from the lofty heights of Mount Pelion to the coastal city of Iolcus was an undertaking spanning several days on foot, tracing a labyrinthine network of winding paths that sliced through ancient forests. Here, venerable oak trees with their sprawling canopies forged majestic cathedral-like spaces, perpetually bathed in a shifting mosaic of dappled sunlight. Jason had traversed these familiar mountains countless times before, but never had his steps been imbued with such profound purpose. Never had he carried the formidable weight of an unfolding destiny alongside the mundane contents of his travelling pack. On the second day of his purposeful trek, Jason encountered a river, not a thunderous, rushing torrent, but a deceptively placid waterway, too profound for an easy wade, too expansive for a daring leap. Its surface glided with a seemingly gentle current, yet one possessed of an insidious strength capable of unbalancing the unwary. On the opposing bank, an aged woman stood, her form bowed by the passage of time, burdened by a bundle of possessions that appeared impossibly heavy for her delicate, stooped shoulders. She was unmistakably a fellow traveller, yet a stark contrast to Jason's youthful vigour, where he possessed strength, as she was frail and struggling. Her garments, though visibly worn, were meticulously clean, and her countenance bore the serene patience of one who had endured a prolonged vigil by the riverside, perhaps clinging to a slender hope for aid that might never materialize. Jason, without a moment's hesitation, moved to assist. This act of spontaneous compassion was a direct embodiment of Chiron's profound teachings, an unwavering imperative to aid travellers in distress, particularly those advanced in years. The old woman's face crinkled into a grateful smile as he extended his offer to carry her across the flowing water, and she ascended onto his back with an astonishing, almost ethereal lightness, as though her very bones were as hollow and delicate as those of a bird. The river crossing proved to be a far more arduous endeavour than Jason had initially anticipated. The water, frigid and biting, quickly induced an ache in his strong legs, and the current, from within its depths, revealed itself to be considerably more forceful than its placid surface had suggested from the bank. Polished river stones, slick and treacherous, shifted precariously beneath his feet, compelling him to halt and regain his equilibrium repeatedly, cautiously probing for the next secure foothold. Midway across, a chilling sensation registered. One of his carefully crafted sandals slipped from his foot, instantly ensnared by the relentless current, and was swept away downstream before he could even attempt to reclaim it. By the time Jason finally attained the opposing bank and gently lowered the old woman, his right foot was starkly bare, a profound, unwitting fulfillment of an ancient warning. The ancient woman offered her gratitude, her lips curving into a knowing smile that held an unsettling familiarity, despite Jason's conviction that their paths had never before crossed. She bestowed a blessing upon his journey, wishing him success in the formidable task of reclaiming what was, by divine right, his own. Pronouncements that, in retrospect, ought to have startled him, for he had divulged nothing of his quest. Yet Jason's immediate concern was entirely absorbed by his lost sandal, prompting him to ponder if he should endeavour to procure another pair before setting foot in Iolcus. Ultimately he resolved to proceed precisely as he was. After all, what substantial difference, he mused, could one solitary missing sandal truly make? As Jason crested the final verdant hill, the city of Iolcus unfolded before him, a sprawling panorama of gleaming white buildings, shimmering under the brilliant afternoon sun, like a vast scattering of polished shells upon a sun-drenched shore. It was a metropolis far grander and more bustling than the serene mountain communities he had known, vibrant with the cacophony of commerce and the incessant, resonant hum of daily human endeavour that formed a living tapestry of sound. Jason's conspicuously bare foot immediately drew a flurry of stares and murmurs as he made his way through the labyrinthine streets toward the royal palace. Passers-by paused, pointed discreetly, and exchanged hushed whispers with their companions. The news, a ripple turning into a wave, swiftly permeated the city. A youthful stranger had arrived, remarkably adorned with only one sandal. By the time Jason approached the imposing palace gates, a palpable tension had descended, and curious, apprehensive crowds had begun to coalesce. The palace guards, usually stoic, betrayed their unease, subtly shifting their weight and gripping their spears with an uncharacteristic tightness. Their heightened vigilance was rooted in specific, long-standing directives concerning one-sandaled visitors, orders issued precisely 20 years prior, on the very day their monarch had first been burdened by his profoundly disturbing prophecy. King Peleus received the fateful tidings within the confines of his private chambers, where he had been immersed in the mundane, yet perpetually complex task of reviewing tax records, grappling with the eternal conundrum of maintaining a kingdom, both prosperous and serene. When his captain of guards delivered a sharp knock upon the door, announcing with a tremor in his voice that the long-dreaded, one-sandaled man had at last arrived, Peleus experienced a sickening lurch in his stomach, a visceral plummet as though he had suddenly stepped off the edge of a precipice. The grand throne room, the monumental setting where Jason was destined to finally confront his uncle, was an architectural masterpiece meticulously crafted to overwhelm and instill awe in any visitor, serving as an immutable testament to the monarch's supreme power. Soaring ceilings, majestic marble columns, and richly woven tapestries depicting the glorious triumphs of antecedent kings. Every element was precisely calculated to diminish the individual, rendering them small and inconsequential before the unassailable might of absolute authority. Yet Jason entered this imposing space not with trepidation, but with the quiet, unshakable confidence meticulously instilled by Chiron. He surveyed his surroundings with an air of keen interest rather than palpable fear, scrutinizing the intricate architecture with the discerning eye of one examining a particularly exquisite piece of craftsmanship. his bare foot a silent herald of his arrival, left ephemeral, dusty impressions upon the highly polished marble floor, a stark and visible trail marking his inexorable advance toward the very seat of power. King Peleus, though advanced in years beyond Jason's initial expectations, presented a striking figure, his hair a pristine white, his visage deeply etched by decades of sagacious deliberation and unyielding vigilance. Yet his gaze remained piercingly acute, perpetually discerning, and it immediately honed in on Jason's solitary sandal with the fervent intensity of one confronting their most dreaded premonitions. So Peleus eventually declared, his voice meticulously modulated, yet imbued with subtle undertones that betrayed an ill-concealed tremor of alarm. "You have appeared before me wearing but a single sandal, precisely as the divine pronouncement foretold. Unveil your identity, young stranger, and disclose the purpose that brings you to my sovereign domain." Jason assumed an upright posture, his words articulating with a clarity that resonated across the vast throne room, carrying the irrefutable authority derived from an unshakable conviction in one's own truth. "My name is Jason, son of Aeson, and I have returned to assert my hereditary entitlement to the sovereign seat that rightfully belongs to my ancestral lineage." The silence that descended upon this bold declaration was utterly profound, so absolute and pervasive that one might have perceived the faintest rustle of a downy plume upon the polished marble flooring. Every individual present within the royal chamber immediately grasped the weighty ramifications of what had just been uttered. The foretold contender had indeed arrived, and the entrenched assurances of the preceding 2 decades were now poised for an imminent trial. King Peleus scrutinized Jason with the predatory focus of a feline observing its quarry, searching for any discernible vulnerability or wavering resolve that could be strategically exploited. However, Jason met his uncle's stare unflinchingly, displaying neither overt challenge nor yielding deference, simply remaining steadfastly poised and awaiting the monarch's subsequent pronouncement. "The throne," Peleus finally stated, "is not a dominion that can be asserted solely by verbal declaration. If you genuinely believe you possess a legitimate right to govern Iolcus, you must first establish your deservingness through heroic undertakings that unequivocally attest to your prowess and intrepidity." This, though Jason remained, at that juncture, unaware of its profound significance, was the pivotal moment that would irrevocably shape the trajectory of his entire existence. Peleus was about to unveil an expedition so perilous to an extreme degree, and fraught with insurmountable obstacles that any individual of sound judgment would unequivocally decline. A formidable undertaking strategically conceived to neutralize an unwelcome familial claimant, while preserving the veneer of equitable judgment and regal rectitude. "There exists an invaluable relic," Peleus continued, his voice adopting the dispassionate tone of someone describing a routine mercantile exchange, "that has been estranged from our lineage for numerous epochs. The golden fleece, sheared from the miraculous winged ram that had, in antiquity, delivered our progenitor Phrixus from peril, now hangs in a remote dominion situated at the very periphery of charted territories." Jason listened intently as his uncle recounted the details of the fleece, its exact location within the far-off kingdom of Colchis, the sheer unfeasibility of the voyage, and the unquestionable fatality that awaited anyone rashly intrepid enough to attempt such a quest. Yet, instead of being deterred, Jason found himself captivated by the formidable undertaking and galvanized by the prospect of heroic exploits. When Peleus concluded his elaborate description and presented his offer, the throne in exchange for the successful retrieval of the golden fleece, Jason embraced the proposition with immediate alacrity. The decision was rendered with such swiftness and unshakable conviction that even Peleus was for an instant rendered speechless. And so, with a handshake that irrevocably bound their destinies together, Jason pledged his unwavering dedication to a quest that would transport him across uncharted maritime expanses to face challenges designed to scrutinize every lesson instilled by the sagacious centaur Chiron about courage, wisdom, and the intricate tapestry of valorous endeavor. As he departed the throne room that day, still conspicuously wearing only one sandal, Jason pondered whether he had just made the most sagacious choice of his life or the most utterly imprudent. But either way, the die was cast. Retreat was no longer an option. The divine decree had begun its unfolding, and somewhere across the boundless sea the golden fleece was patiently waiting. The formidable challenge of successfully retrieving the golden fleece was intrinsically unachievable by a solitary individual, a truth Jason recognized even prior to his departure from King Peleus's opulent throne room. Such an epic quest would necessitate not merely intrepidity and resolute will, but also a seaworthy vessel engineered for navigating uncharted maritime territories, provisions ample for an expedition of indeterminate duration, and, most crucially, a company of fellow travellers possessing specialised aptitudes and proficiencies that would synergistically augment his capabilities. The arduous process of mustering an expeditionary force commenced the very next morning when Jason dispatched heralds across the Hellenic lands, carrying summonses to celebrated champions whose renown had transcended the confines of their native polities. These were far from arbitrary solicitations for assistance, but rather meticulously deliberated propositions extended to chosen personages whose distinctive talents would prove indispensable for the forthcoming trials. The first to arrive was Hercules, whose legendary prowess was matched only by his remarkable amiability in ordinary discourse. One might naturally anticipate someone capable of diverting mighty waterways and purifying the famously formidable Augean stables to be boisterous and ostentatious. But Hercules uttered words with soft intonation and lent an attentive ear, posing insightful inquiries about the journey ahead and the extensive preparations that would be required. Hercules had been meticulously nurturing solanaceous vines in his garden when Jason's messenger arrived, carefully training tomato plants to ascend wooden stakes with the identical steadfastness he applied to his mythic undertakings. His hands, of a formidable size capable of subduing leonine beasts, manipulated with exquisite precision among the leaves and stems, adjusting supports and removing insects that might damage the growing fruit. When he consented to participate in the arduous voyage, Hercules stipulated unequivocally that his involvement would be of a finite duration. He had pressing commitments in other spheres, responsibilities that precluded perpetual deferral, but he could allocate a period of a few moons for a heroic endeavour that vowed to adequately challenge his unique talents. His presence would provide both tangible aid and the incontestable gravitas emanating from his widespread veneration. Orpheus arrived the following day, carrying his lyre in a case polished to a lustrous sheen by countless peregrinations, still softly vocalizing a tune he had been crafting en route to Iolcus. His music was already celebrated across the Hellenic peninsula, but in addition to his prodigious musical talents, he held a profound understanding of remote territories and alien traditions that would prove of immeasurable utility throughout their expedition. The young musician had spent years roaming from one urban centre to another, performing in royal courts and village squares, assimilating the narratives and lyrical compositions that wove together disparate societies across the known world. His memory contained granular intelligence concerning mercantile pathways, meteorological vicissitudes, and the intricate geopolitical dynamics between far-flung sovereignties, utilitarian insights veiled beneath the guise of artistic performance. Castor and Pollux, the renowned Gemini, brought with them mastery in equestrian arts and pugilistic combat, respectively. More significantly, however, they epitomized the collaborative synergy that would be indispensable for the forthcoming trials. They had been engaging in combat and cooperative endeavours since their earliest years, developing a nearly extrasensory rapport that allowed them to harmonize their actions devoid of verbal exchange. The twins had been gentling nascent steeds when Jason's invitation reached them, working patiently with animals unaccustomed to the restrictive implements of bit and bridle, teaching them to acquiesce to human direction via patient perseverance, as opposed to coercive power. Their methods were gradual yet efficacious, founded upon comprehension and reciprocal esteem, rather than subjugation and terror. Zetes and Calais, the airy scions of Boreas, the north wind, arrived together in a manner that was both pragmatic yet breathtaking. They flew in from the rugged peaks where they had been living in serene seclusion, landing in Jason's courtyard with the kind of unfettered elegance that rendered aerial locomotion as intuitive as terrestrial ambulation. These brothers possessed faculties that would demonstrate pivotal during certain portions of their journey, but they also brought with them cognizance of atmospheric flows and meteorological phenomena that could help them circumvent tempestuous squalls and harness propitious breezes. Their vantage point, quite literally raised above the preoccupations of terrestrial beings, offered perceptions unattainable by any common mariner. Atalanta was perhaps the most contentious inclusion to the crew, not because of any inadequacy in her proficiencies, but because incorporating a woman in such an expedition directly contravened conventional norms concerning heroic adventures. She was a huntress and pathfinder whose sylvan aptitudes were unrivalled by any of her male contemporaries, capable of sourcing sustenance and hydration in locales where others would face certain famine. Her presence ignited spirited debates amidst her heroic peers about the evolving paradigm of valorous endeavour and the expedient demands of their undertaking. Some worried that having a woman aboard would bring ill fortune, while others argued that her talents were far too precious to disregard solely on account of her sex. In the end, utilitarian imperatives superseded antiquated biases. Atalanta had been residing in solitary communion with the rugged peaks sustaining her existence via venery and foraging. When Jason's message found her, her isolated existence had inculcated a profound sense of autonomy and ingenuity that would prove essential during the long months at sea, when spontaneous adaptation and inventive resolution of dilemmas would often mean the difference between success and failure. Tiphys, who would serve as their master of celestial guidance and steering, brought with him a profound understanding of stellar constellations and oceanic flows that had been bequeathed across successive familial lines of mariners. His grandfather had been a naval commander, his father had piloted commercial craft, and he had grown up assimilating the interpretation of nuanced indicators that differentiate secure channels from treacherous expanses. The discipline of seafaring direction in that bygone era required skills that have been predominantly eclipsed in our contemporary epoch of digital instrumentation and orbital positioning systems. Typhus could ascertain their geographical coordinates through meticulous observation of the chromatic variations and hydrodynamic oscillations of the sea, the conduct of pelagic avifauna, the configurations of nebulae at the distant demarcation of sky and sea, and a multitude of other organic phenomena that most people never notice. Argus, the highly esteemed shipbuilder entrusted with the monumental task of constructing their specialized vessel, arrived bearing an impressive collection of rolled parchments. These documents were not mere sketches, but intricate blueprints and exhaustive calculations, representing the culmination of his profound insights and rigorous experimentation spanning numerous years. His genius had long been focused on conceiving the ultimate ship for precisely such an epic journey, integrating avant-garde innovations that perceptibly stretched the accepted limits of contemporary maritime technology. His meticulously crafted designs envisioned a craft that would transcend the typical dimensions and resilience of standard Greek ships, featuring bespoke modifications engineered to allow it to withstand and navigate through tempestuous gales that would inevitably shatter ordinary seafaring vessels. Crucially, he had imbued its design with an exceptional capacity for speed, keenly understanding that swiftness would often serve as their paramount defense against the myriad perils they were destined to encounter across uncharted waters. Each distinguished hero who pledged their allegiance to this extraordinary expedition contributed not solely their legendary prowess and celebrated abilities, but also a wealth of practical competencies and indispensable everyday knowledge, all of which would prove absolutely vital for their collective survival. Admetus, for instance, brought an invaluable mastery of animal husbandry, possessing a deep understanding of how to meticulously care for and sustain livestock during extended sea voyages. Peleus offered his profound expertise in the intricate art of metalworking and the critical maintenance of weaponry, ensuring their arms remained in peak condition. Telamon, in turn, provided extensive experience gleaned from siege warfare and the strategic construction of fortifications, skills that could be unexpectedly crucial in hostile encounters ashore. The intricate process of assembling this formidable crew unfolded over several weeks, during which Jason's usually serene courtyard underwent a gradual transformation. It steadily filled with an increasing number of heroes, their diverse and specialized equipment, and the incessant hum of spirited discussions that inevitably arise when a gathering of strong-willed, independent individuals endeavors to synchronize their formidable efforts toward a singular, overarching objective. These were, by their very nature, not men accustomed to passively receiving directives, and thus, discovering effective methods for collaborative effort demanded considerable patience and astute diplomacy from every participant involved. Evening repasts during this formative period proved particularly illuminating, as the assembled heroes freely recounted vivid tales of their past exploits and remarkable adventures. These shared narratives served as a crucial catalyst, allowing them to progressively grasp the full spectrum of abilities and the distinct personalities of their future comrades. Orpheus, with his celestial lyre, provided a captivating musical accompaniment to these nightly gatherings, weaving an enchanting atmosphere that simultaneously encouraged earnest strategic planning and fostered the kind of informal, heartfelt bonding so essential for cultivating genuine trust among individuals. These profound conversations laid bare the diverse and often deeply personal motivations that had impelled each hero to accept Jason's audacious invitation. Some were undeniably spurred by the tantalizing prospect of unparalleled glory and enduring fame, a reputation that would undoubtedly accrue from participating in such an ambitious and widely publicized quest. Others were driven by a sincere affection for Jason himself and an unwavering loyalty to his noble cause. A select few, perhaps, were simply experiencing a profound ennui with their current circumstances, eagerly anticipating the invigorating thrill of novel challenges and unexplored horizons. Yet, irrespective of their individual reasons for joining this perilous venture, a collective understanding permeated their ranks. Their ultimate success hinged entirely upon their capacity to function as a cohesive unit, rather than as a mere disparate collection of individual heroic figures. The formidable obstacles they were destined to confront could not possibly be surmounted through individual excellence alone. They would imperatively demand synchronized action, unwavering mutual support, and the profound collective wisdom that organically emerges when seasoned individuals conscientiously collaborate toward universally shared goals. As the crew roster approached its final configuration, Jason began to grasp the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of the undertaking they were preparing to attempt. These were, without exaggeration, some of the most celebrated and renowned heroes in all of Greece, individuals whose illustrious names were already whispered with awe throughout the entire civilized world. By orchestrating their convergence for this singular quest, he was, in essence, forging something utterly unprecedented, a grand collaboration between legendary figures that would either culminate in an achievement of truly remarkable and enduring significance, or, conversely, end in a spectacular and unforgettable failure. The penultimate addition to their burgeoning crew was Lynceus, a man whose prodigious eyesight was so extraordinarily acute that he could discern the faint outlines of distant ships on the horizon long before they became even remotely visible to ordinary human vision. His uncanny ability to detect potential dangers or opportune moments at vast distances would furnish them with invaluable advanced warning, a capability that could very well prove absolutely crucial during the unpredictable course of their extensive travels. When the full complement of the crew had finally assembled, they numbered exactly 50 heroes, each one contributing a distinctive array of unique abilities and specialized knowledge to their shared, perilous enterprise. Gazing upon them gathered in his courtyard, Jason experienced a complex surge of emotions, feeling both immense pride in their collective strength and an underlying tremor of terror at the weight of his responsibility. These formidable men had willingly agreed to submit to his leadership, to follow him into unknown and perilous territories, implicitly trusting his judgment and utterly depending on his decisions for their very survival. The sheer burden of this responsibility felt utterly overwhelming, yet paradoxically, it was also profoundly energizing. For the very first time since reluctantly accepting Peleus's daunting challenge, a nascent belief began to take root within Jason. Their audacious quest might, in fact, genuinely succeed. With companions of such caliber, even the seemingly impossible might be rendered merely difficult. However, before they could even contemplate setting sail, they required a vessel truly worthy of such an extraordinary crew, a ship meticulously designed and expertly constructed specifically for the unparalleled challenges that lay ahead. And amidst the burgeoning excitement of their intensive preparations, not a single one of them could have possibly conceived how that magnificent ship would, in time, become as legendary and enduring in myth as the very heroes who were destined to sail within her hull. The momentous construction of the Argo commenced precisely at dawn on a day when the ambient air was exceptionally still and perfectly clear, presenting ideal conditions for the kind of exacting, precise craftsmanship that shipbuilding inherently demands. Argus had judiciously selected a prime location situated conveniently near the harbour, where the ground was both level and commendably firm. This site was close enough to the water's edge to facilitate a smooth eventual launching, yet sufficiently far inland to provide ample space for the extensive and intricate construction process that stretched out before them. The initial fundamental task involved the meticulous selection of the prime timber that would ultimately form the ship's robust backbone and its supporting ribs. This was far from a simple matter of merely finding large trees. It necessitated the painstaking identification of wood, possessing the precise grain patterns, the optimal balance between inherent flexibility and unyielding strength, and the perfect seasoning that is only achieved through considerable age and scrupulous preparation. Argus navigated through the adjacent forests with the discerning eye of a physician examining patients, his hands tracing the rough contours of tree trunks, his fingers testing the inherent resilience of branches, and even at times inhaling the subtle scent of the bark to definitively ascertain which particular trees would yield the superior material for their extraordinary vessel. The heroes, carrying their formidable axes and saws, followed closely behind him, diligently learning to discern the nuanced differences that unequivocally distinguished truly superior timber from merely adequate wood. The majestic oak trees ultimately chosen for the ship's foundational frame were ancient, towering giants that had been steadily growing since the era of their grandfather's youth. The arduous task of felling these venerable trees demanded not only immense physical exertion, but also the solemn observance of specific ceremonies, rituals designed to honor the profound sacrifice of living entities for the greater purposes of humankind. Each tree was respectfully acknowledged and thanked before the very first axe blow was struck, and small, symbolic offerings of precious wine and sweet honey were poured reverently onto the earth, a tangible acknowledgement of the significant debt they were incurring. The intricate process of shaping the raw timber was a slow, painstaking endeavor, demanding meticulous care and an absolute refusal to be rushed, lest the integrity of the final product be compromised. The heroes, working in shifts, wielded adzes and planes with focused determination, gradually transforming rough, unyielding logs into the precisely curved beams that would ultimately provide the essential structural support for their ship's magnificent hull. The work, in its inherent repetition, possessed a meditative quality, the steady, rhythmic cadence of tools against wood creating a surprisingly peaceful atmosphere that actively encouraged both quiet conversation and harmonious cooperation. Hercules, perhaps unexpectedly, proved particularly invaluable during this phase of construction, not solely because of his legendary strength, though his formidable power certainly aided in the heavy task of moving massive timbers, but primarily due to his unwavering patience and meticulous attention to detail. His massive, powerful hands were, surprisingly, remarkably delicate when manipulating hand tools, capable of shaping wood with the same astonishing precision that other master craftsmen could only achieve through years of dedicated practice. The innovative design of the Argo incorporated groundbreaking features that had never before been attempted in the annals of Greek shipbuilding. Argus, a true visionary, had diligently studied vessels from ancient Egypt and the seafaring Phoenicians, assiduously learning their advanced techniques, which he then ingeniously adapted to suit the specific and unique requirements of their quest. The resultant ship would be notably longer and narrower than traditional designs, explicitly engineered for unparalleled speed rather than mere cargo capacity, and fortified with strategic reinforcements that would enable it to survive the most ferocious storms, tempestuous conditions that would undoubtedly obliterate conventional craft. One of the most profoundly unusual and mystical features incorporated into the Argo was the prophetic talking beam that Argus meticulously installed in the ship's prow. This extraordinary piece of wood had been reverently cut from a sacred oak within the hallowed grove at Dodona, a revered site where Zeus's venerable oracle delivered its enigmatic prophecies. This sentient beam was destined to provide invaluable guidance throughout their perilous journey, offering crucial advice and timely warnings that could assist them in navigating both tangible physical hazards and insidious supernatural dangers. The sacred installation of this prophetic beam necessitated elaborate ceremonies that seamlessly blended the practical art of shipbuilding with profound religious observance. Esteemed priests from the venerable temple of Zeus meticulously supervised the entire process, ensuring that the sacred wood was properly blessed and positioned according to ancient, hallowed traditions that governed the intricate interaction between divine wisdom and human enterprise. As the ship's grand frame steadily took discernible shape, other heroes began to channel their energies into crafting the specialized equipment that would be absolutely essential for their epic voyage. Tiphys, with his expert knowledge, meticulously supervised the construction of the intricate steering mechanisms, systems designed to ensure precise control even amidst the most tumultuous and rough seas. The famed winged brothers Zets and Calais collaboratively worked on developing sophisticated rigging systems that could be adjusted with remarkable swiftness, allowing them to optimally exploit rapidly changing wind conditions. The creation of the ship's magnificent sail was a truly communal endeavor, involving not only the heroes themselves, but also the skilled women of Iolcus, who possessed the exceptional weaving abilities necessary to fabricate a fabric of such immense strength that it could withstand the relentless onslaught of ocean storms. They toiled in dedicated shifts, painstakingly maintaining consistent tension and intricate thread patterns, ensuring that stress would be distributed evenly across the entire surface of the sail. Witnessing the sail gradually take form on the colossal looms that had been purposefully erected near the construction site was akin to observing a breathtaking work of art emerge from a foundation of meticulous planning and extraordinarily skilled execution. The resultant fabric was not merely functional, it was astonishingly beautiful. intricately woven with patterns that eloquently narrated tales of previous heroic voyages and incorporated powerful symbols believed to bestow good fortune upon their unprecedented enterprise. The extensive fabrication of the vessel was not the sole undertaking occupying the city's attention. Simultaneously, a meticulous process of logistical readiness unfolded. Essential provisions were being amassed and expertly safeguarded for the arduous maritime journey that lay before them. This included robust barrels of vintage wine, carefully selected to retain its potable quality through many months at sea, a bounty of succulent dried fruits and expertly cured meats, prepared to withstand the ravages of time without succumbing to spoilage, and sturdy amphorae brimming with precious olive oil, hermetically sealed to repel moisture and guard against any form of contamination. The intricate task of outfitting such an ambitious expedition demanded an understanding that far transcended mere culinary skills. The valiant heroes were compelled to ascertain not only the precise quantities required, but also the most judicious methods for efficient stowage, the critical techniques for shielding these vital stores from corrosive salt water and insidious vermin, and the imperative of guaranteeing their sustained nutritional potency throughout extended periods of confinement within the ship's limited confines. Particular diligence was also dedicated to their formidable weaponry and defensive armour, given the inherent susceptibility of unprotected metal to the corrosive influence of the saline sea air. Consequently, every piece of equipment belonging to each hero underwent a rigorous regimen of meticulous cleansing, thorough oiling, and subsequent encasement in specially treated leather, a barrier designed to actively thwart the onset of rust and deterioration throughout the duration of their maritime odyssey. Furthermore, a comprehensive array of reserve armaments was diligently readied, a prudent measure taken to mitigate any potential loss or impairment of their primary gear during the unforeseen exigencies of their impending exploits. The formidable hull of the Argo received a vital protective coating, meticulously sealed with a robust amalgam of pine pitch and beeswax. This viscous compound was carefully heated and then expeditiously applied while still pliable, forging an impenetrable, watertight membrane engineered to ensure the vessel's buoyancy even amidst the most tempestuous oceanic conditions. This exacting procedure demanded an impeccable sense of timing and synchronized effort, for the sealing substance necessitated an even distribution across the surfaces before its inevitable cooling and subsequent solidification rendered it intractable. With the monumental construction drawing to its culmination, the magnificent ship began to draw an ever-increasing throng of onlookers from every corner of Greece. Rumours had swiftly disseminated regarding the unparalleled convocation of legendary heroes and the audacious expedition they were poised to embark upon. Enterprising merchants converged, aspiring to peddle their wares and provisions. Vigorous young men presented themselves, eager to secure a coveted berth among the crew, and countless common folks simply yearned to behold the majestic vessel destined to transport such fabled personages. This pervasive public scrutiny, while undeniably gratifying, simultaneously presented a significant quandary. Although the heroes genuinely valued the enthusiastic endorsement and curiosity of their compatriots, the incessant flow of sightseers impeded their diligent efforts and engendered pressing security apprehensions. It was beyond doubt that King Peleus maintained an unblinking surveillance over their every preparatory move, and an excessive degree of public visibility could inevitably complicate their ultimate clandestine departure. The precise date designated for the Argo's grand launching was not arbitrarily determined, but rather painstakingly pinpointed through an intricate confluence of profound astronomical observations and weighty religious imperatives. This necessitated extensive dialogues and profound deliberations with a multitude of revered oracles and venerable priests. The celestial configuration of the stars, the specific lunar phase, and the prevailing seasonal trajectories of wind and atmospheric conditions were all meticulously scrutinized, each element demanding a propitious alignment to guarantee that their extraordinary undertaking would commence under the most felicitous auspices conceivable. The launching ceremony itself unfolded as a truly magnificent spectacle, drawing together not merely the valiant heroes and their devoted adherents, but also esteemed envoys from numerous city-states across the Hellenic world, each eager to bear witness to this epoch-making event. The expansive shoreline teemed with an immense concourse of onlookers, while the adjacent harbour bristled with a flotilla of smaller craft, each laden with keen observers striving for the most advantageous vantage point of the unfolding proceedings. The formidable task of transporting the fully constructed vessel from its dry dock assembly point to the lapping waters of the shoreline demanded both meticulous strategic foresight and an immense expenditure of physical exertion. Substantial logs were strategically positioned beneath the Argo's keel, functioning as rudimentary yet effective rollers, while an intricate network of robust ropes was meticulously arranged to direct the colossal craft's ponderous progress towards the awaiting sea. Every single hero lent their formidable strength to this monumental endeavour, augmented by scores of eager volunteers who regarded it as an unparalleled privilege to assist in the inauguration of such a renowned ship. The precise instant the Argo made her inaugural contact with the water was charged with an almost palpable current of exhilaration and eager expectation. The vessel, with an elegant poise reminiscent of a majestic swan, glided into her destined element, riding high and maintaining an unwavering equilibrium. She responded to the gentle undulations of the minor waves with subtle shifts that eloquently conveyed both her inherent robust strength and her inherent nimble agility. A resounding chorus of acclamations erupted from the vast assembled throngs, and even the very heroes who had painstakingly fashioned her felt a profound swell of profound pride upon witnessing their magnificent creation awaken to life. Remarkably, the mystical talking beam articulated its first pronouncement precisely as the ship embraced the water, its resonant voice piercing distinctly across the entire expanse of the harbour. Undeterred by the tumultuous din of the ongoing festivities, "I am prepared for the expedition that awaits," it declared with an unwavering tone. "And those courageous souls who embark upon this voyage with me shall encounter tribulations designed to thoroughly test their valour, their sagacity, and their unwavering fidelity to one another." Over the ensuing days, the intrepid heroes dedicated themselves to the earnest task of stowing their provisions and gear, meticulously fine-tuning the intricate rigging, and assiduously acquainting themselves with the nuances of their magnificent new vessel. Each individual was allocated precise responsibilities and designated stations, and they diligently rehearsed their collective actions until their movements achieved a harmonious coordination and remarkable efficiency. The Argo, in every respect, surpassed the lofty expectations Argus had instilled, proving herself to be even more extraordinary than foretold. She exhibited remarkable swiftness and acute responsiveness, possessing the singular ability to sail significantly closer to the wind than any traditional craft, yet simultaneously maintaining an impressive stability that afforded a secure platform even amidst tumultuous atmospheric conditions. Her pioneering design elements functioned with impeccable precision, exactly as envisioned, and the heroes rapidly cultivated and profound trust in their vessel's exceptional capabilities. As the fated day of their departure drew ever nearer, a palpable transformation in the crew's collective disposition became evident, their spirits growing progressively more concentrated and resolute. The protracted period of meticulous preparation was drawing to its definitive conclusion, and the authentic Odyssey was poised to commence. They had forged not merely a formidable vessel, but rather a nascent, self-contained floating community, a sanctuary that would steadfastly convey them across uncharted maritime expanses toward formidable trials, challenges destined to rigorously test the very essence of all they had assimilated, concerning valor, camaraderie, and the relentless pursuit of seemingly unattainable aspirations. On the eve preceding their momentous departure, as the Argo swayed with a gentle rhythm at her moorings and the heroes meticulously completed their ultimate arrangements, Jason positioned himself upon the deck, his gaze sweeping back towards the city from which his monumental quest had first sprung. On the morrow they would embark upon a journey into a future veiled in uncertainty, yet tonight they stood unequivocally prepared. Their magnificent ship was robust and seaworthy, and their assembled crew comprised individuals as competent and formidable as any ever gathered. What visions, one might ponder, graced the slumber of these heroes during that concluding night in familiar waters, before they ventured forth beyond the recognized boundaries of the world, propelled towards exploits that would irrevocably etch their names into the annals of immortality. The initial weeks spent navigating the vast ocean expanses constituted a crucial phase of adaptation for both the intrepid heroes and their formidable vessel. As a complement of 50 men endeavoured to acclimate themselves to the exigencies of communal living and cooperative labour within the circumscribed dimensions of the Argo's deck, the initial exhilaration of their grand commencement progressively yielded to the unwavering cadences of maritime transit. This new reality was punctuated by the ceaseless murmur of water caressing the hull, the pervasive crepitation of taut ropes and sturdy timbers, and the methodical alternation of responsibilities that ensured their ship's seamless progression across the undulating waves. Jason, in his capacity as leader, swiftly ascertained that the art of command at sea necessitated a distinct repertoire of aptitudes, fundamentally divergent from those he had anticipated. On terra firma, a commander possessed the prerogative to issue directives and confidently expect their execution by subordinates, who subsequently dispersed to their individual existences. Aboard the Argo, however, each singular determination exerted an instantaneous influence upon every member of the company, compelling the heroes to operate as an intricately synchronized collective, where personal inclinations were unequivocally subsumed by the overarching requirements of the communal endeavour. The regimented daily routines that progressively materialized during those formative weeks rapidly constituted the bedrock of their nascent maritime community. The advent of dawn heralded the careful kindling of the cooking fire within its safeguarded brazier. the meticulous preparation of unadorned repasts derived from their judiciously rationed provisions, and the systematic allocation of duties for the impending day, while each hero was entrusted with responsibilities commensurate with his unique proficiencies. Every individual also actively participated in the shared, quotidian tasks essential for the vessel's optimal operation. Orpheus, in particular, demonstrated an indispensable value throughout this phase, not merely for his captivating musical divertissements during the twilight hours, but profoundly for his singular capacity to compose melodies that harmonized their labor. The compelling rhythm of his music facilitated the synchronization of their rowing strokes, rendered arduous, repetitive chores considerably more tolerable, and instilled a profound sense of communal objective that transmuted disparate individual exertions into a unified collective accomplishment. After a voyage spanning several weeks, the island of Lemnos materialized upon their distant horizon, its rugged coastline and dispersed habitations offering a profoundly welcome vista, following the monotonous, boundless stretch of the open ocean. Yet, as they steadily diminished the intervening distance, the heroes commenced to discern an unsettling anomaly concerning this ostensibly familiar port of call. The harbours, which by all expectations should have been bustling with the activity of fishing vessels and commercial ships, presented an eerie and inexplicable desolation. Tiphys, the seasoned helmsman, his gaze meticulously sweeping the island through the sharpened acuity that his extensive years of seafaring had cultivated, was the first among them to articulate the conspicuous absence of customary maritime bustle. There ought to be telltale plumes of smoke ascending from cooking fires, numerous small craft plying the waters between the shoreline and the moored vessels, and industrious figures engaged in various tasks upon the docks, he thoughtfully remarked. However, I perceive none of the characteristic indicators that typically signify a vibrant and prosperous port community. Upon the Argo's stately ingress into the principal harbour of Lemnos, the perplexing enigma surrounding the island intensified considerably. The quaysides, it was apparent, were impeccably kept, and manifestly still in active service. Yet the only individuals discernible were women, not merely a handful of females occupied with specific responsibilities, but rather an entirely female populace, attending to every conceivable task ordinarily undertaken by the combined efforts of men and women in mixed societal structures. The official delegation dispatched to greet them at the harbour was presided over by Queen Hypsipyle, a sovereign whose dignified demeanour and inherent authority instantly elicited profound deference from the arriving heroes. She occupied that transitional phase of life, neither youthful nor aged, where a wealth of accumulated experience and an unwavering self-assurance converged to forge an undeniable, innate leadership. Her inquiries concerning their extensive voyage and ultimate destination were acutely perceptive and remarkably well versed, indicative of a profound cognizance of maritime intricacies that vastly exceeded the bounds of mere passing curiosity. The profound elucidation for Lemnos's singular predicament progressively unfolded through a series of dialogues conducted over the span of several days. The island had endured a calamitous social upheaval that had tragically expunged its entire male populace, thereby compelling the women to sustain their community through their collective fortitude and remarkable resourcefulness. The genesis of this profound misfortune was both deeply poignant and remarkably illuminating. The men of Lemnos had become entangled in a protracted sequence of hostilities with adjacent islands, contentions that had incrementally intensified from trivial disagreements concerning commercial exchanges and fishing prerogatives into unbridled full-scale warfare. One after another, the physically capable men had departed their homes to wage conflicts that, at the juncture, appeared to possess paramount significance, yet ultimately proved to be utterly futile. Those warriors who had endured the brutal conflicts found themselves so profoundly altered by their harrowing experiences that a return to the quietude of ordinary civilian existence became an insurmountable challenge. They developed an unceasing restlessness and a propensity for aggression, proving utterly incapable of reintegrating into the familiar rhythms of domesticity and communal life that had once brought them contentment. In due course, the majority made the definitive choice to forsake Lemnos entirely, embarking upon a relentless pursuit of fresh skirmishes and exploits, rather than dedicating themselves to the arduous task of reconstructing the very society they had played a part in dismantling. The women who remained on the island were confronted with a momentous decision, either to abandon their ancestral homes and the remnants of their community, or to devise innovative strategies for its preservation without any masculine support. They resolutely opted for the latter course, diligently cultivating novel proficiencies and assuming responsibilities that, by long-standing custom, had been exclusively allocated to men. This transformative endeavour culminated in the establishment of a functional and prosperous society, yet one that, by its very nature, possessed certain lacunae, simultaneously giving rise to both unprecedented opportunities and formidable challenges. Queen Hypsipyle and her esteemed council of advisers evinced a particular and profound interest in the arriving Argonauts, primarily because their unexpected presence signified the inaugural substantial encounter with the broader world, since their community's transition to an exclusively female populace. While the heroes were undoubtedly esteemed guests, they were also perceived as potential collaborators in addressing several pressing practical dilemmas that had arisen from their unique societal configuration. The most immediate and critical concern revolved around the fundamental question of procreation and the long-term perpetuation of their society. A community composed solely of women could certainly sustain itself for a single generation, but in the absence of men, its eventual disappearance was an inescapable certainty. Thus, the advent of 50 valiant heroes presented both a fortuitous opportunity and an intricate web of social and ethical considerations demanding meticulous deliberation. For their part, the illustrious heroes discovered themselves immersed in a situation that fundamentally challenged many of their deeply ingrained preconceptions concerning societal structures and traditional gender roles. The resilient women of Lemnos had not only competently but remarkably managed tasks that Hellenic tradition unequivocally designated as intrinsically masculine, encompassing the intricate crafts of shipbuilding and metalworking, the robust demands of military defense, and the complexities of political governance. Their undeniable proficiency in these domains raised provocative questions about the inherent necessity, or lack thereof, of rigid, gender-based divisions in societal labour. Atalanta, the sole woman among the Argonauts' distinguished company, found herself particularly captivated by the profound observations she made on Lemnos. Throughout her life, she had frequently been informed that her remarkable abilities were singular and exceptional, rather than indicative of the broader potential inherent in all women. Yet, here before her was an entire thriving community of women who had not only cultivated sophisticated skills, but had also willingly embraced responsibilities that the majority of Greek men presumptuously deemed to lie far beyond female capabilities. The days that the Argonauts sojourned on Lemnos were replete with a harmonious blend of activities encompassing periods of much-needed rest and spirited recreation, alongside enriching cultural exchange and invaluable practical assistance. The heroes readily lent their formidable physical strength to various construction projects, simultaneously gaining insights into the ingenious innovations and adaptive solutions that the Lemnian women had painstakingly developed during their extended years of self-sufficiency. Hercules, renowned for his legendary might, proved especially indispensable during this period, not merely for his prodigious power, but equally for his gentle disposition and astute practical intellect. He laboured assiduously alongside the women on diverse undertakings, ranging from critical harbour enhancements to experimental agricultural ventures, consistently treating them as respected equals and esteemed colleagues rather than as exotic curiosities or prospective romantic interests. As twilight descended, the evenings came alive with the enchanting melodies of music and the captivating artistry of storytelling. Orpheus, with his divine lyre, performed for rapt and appreciative audiences, while the Lemnian women reciprocated by sharing their own cherished songs and ancient tales. These profound cultural exchanges illuminated both the striking similarities and the intriguing divergences between their respective societies, fostering a deep mutual understanding and a genuine friendship that transcended the unusual circumstances of their initial encounter. However, despite the undeniable pleasures of their sojourn on Lemnos, the heroes gradually began to perceive the insistent pull of their original, overarching quest. The fabled golden fleece still awaited them in the distant and perilous land of Colchis, and each passing day spent in such comfort and security was a day that brought them no nearer to the achievement of their ultimate objective. The discerning women of Lemnos, comprehending this burgeoning restlessness, made no attempt to unduly prolong or impede the Argonauts' eventual departure. Queen Hypsipyle's valedictory address to the departing heroes was characterized by a graceful eloquence and an astute practicality. She expressed heartfelt gratitude for their invaluable assistance and the camaraderie they had shared. Yet she also sagaciously acknowledged that their destinies lay irrevocably elsewhere. The unique bond forged between Lemnos and the Argonauts, she affirmed, would endure as a cherished and positive memory for both factions, but it could not, by its very nature, evolve into a permanent arrangement. Some among the heroes had, during their stay, cultivated tender romantic attachments, rendering the process of departure an emotionally arduous experience for both parties involved. Nevertheless, an unspoken understanding prevailed. The paramount importance of the quest superseded any individual personal preferences, and consequently, the farewells were conducted with an exemplary blend of dignity and mutual respect. As the magnificent Argo gracefully sailed away from the shores of Lemnos, the heroes carried with them not merely provisions, but also profound new perspectives on the intricate tapestry of society, the fluidity of gender roles, and the diverse methodologies through which communities can adeptly organize themselves for both enduring survival and sustained prosperity. They had been privileged witnesses to a remarkably successful experiment in social adaptation, and they had seen firsthand that human ingenuity possessed the remarkable capacity to surmount even the most formidable and challenging circumstances. This transformative experience had also served to profoundly reinforce their understanding of the true essence of their own mission. They were not merely pursuing a magical treasure, but actively participating in a grand quest that would rigorously test their collective ability to collaborate effectively, to adapt with resilience to unforeseen circumstances, and to steadfastly maintain their unwavering focus on long-term objectives despite the allure of fleeting short-term distractions. Behind them, the women of Lemnos returned to the familiar rhythm of their daily routines, yet they were undeniably enriched by their illuminating contact with the outside world, and imbued with a renewed confidence in their inherent ability to steadfastly continue building the precise kind of thriving society they aspired to inhabit. Ahead of the Argonauts, meanwhile, lay a succession of novel challenges and perilous adventures that would further refine and test their burgeoning comprehension of heroism and the fundamental principles of community. One might ponder what enduring lessons truly resonated with the heroes as they navigated towards their subsequent adventure. And indeed, how might their memorable sojourn on Lemnos have irrevocably altered their understanding of what it genuinely signifies to construct a society founded upon the bedrock of cooperation rather than the coercive hand of domination? The departure from Lemnos unequivocally signified the commencement of an entirely new and more formidable phase in their epic journey. As the Argonauts ventured into maritime territories that were considerably less familiar and inherently more perilous than the comparatively safe routes they had traversed during their initial weeks at sea, the ambient weather patterns became strikingly more capricious, manifesting in sudden, violent storms that rigorously tested both their collective seamanship and the structural integrity of the Argo herself. Concurrently, the coastal landmarks that had hitherto provided dependable navigational reference points grew increasingly sparse and alien, prompting the mystical talking beam embedded within their ship's prow to offer more frequent counsel during this period. Its prophetic voice issued dire warnings of impending dangers and suggested crucial course corrections that, at times, diverged significantly from their predetermined route. Learning to accurately interpret and decisively act upon this supernatural guidance demanded a distinct kind of seamanship, one unlike any of the heroes had ever previously practiced or encountered. Tiphys, the skilled helmsman, proved himself particularly adept at seamlessly integrating conventional navigational techniques with the mystical guidance imparted by their ship's sentient oracle. He ingeniously devised methods for rigorously cross-referencing the accuracy of the prophetic warnings against observable meteorological indicators and prevailing current patterns, thereby forging a sophisticated synthesis of practical acumen and supernatural insight. This innovative approach proved instrumental in safeguarding them through several potentially catastrophic encounters with tempestuous storms and treacherous submerged reefs. The next significant point of landfall for the Argonauts was the verdant peninsula of the Doliones, a realm where King Cyzicus held sway over a populace universally renowned throughout the wider region for their exemplary hospitality and inherently peaceful disposition. The Doliones had assiduously cultivated their prosperity through the judicious practice of trade, rather than through military conquest, consistently fostering amicable relationships with their neighbouring communities and graciously offering secure havens for weary travellers hailing from distant lands. King Cyzicus himself was a youthful monarch, likely no older in years than Jason, who had but recently ascended to his throne, succeeding a father widely celebrated for his profound wisdom and just governance. The new king, eager to demonstrate his worthiness of such a noble inheritance, extended an effusive welcome to the famed Argonauts, orchestrating elaborate ceremonies that paid homage to both their burgeoning reputation and the ambitious scope of their quest. The heroes were forthwith provided with exceedingly comfortable lodgings, an abundant supply of delectable food, and the kind of genuine, heartfelt hospitality that possesses the rare power to make even the most seasoned travellers momentarily forget the arduous hardships of their long journey. King Cyzicus evinced a particular fascination in hearing detailed accounts of their adventures, and the evening entertainments were enriched by a captivating repertoire of stories and songs that passionately celebrated the heroic traditions intrinsically woven into the fabric of all Greek communities. During their restorative sojourn with the Doliones, the heroes were afforded invaluable opportunities to replenish their ship's provisions, meticulously repair any equipment that had sustained damage during the recent turbulent storms, and enjoy a much-needed period of rest in anticipation of the formidable challenges that lay ahead. It was precisely the kind of essential interlude that every protracted journey demands, a crucial pause that facilitates both vital physical recuperation and indispensable mental preparation for whatever trials might subsequently arise. However, their otherwise tranquil visit to the Doliones was tragically fated to culminate in disaster, a grim outcome precipitated by an unfortunate series of misunderstandings and ill-timed coincidences that starkly illustrated the alarming ease with which even the most benevolent intentions can inadvertently pave the path to catastrophe. The Argonauts' intended departure from the peninsula was unexpectedly thwarted by contrary winds, compelling them to anchor overnight in a secluded bay that, in the deceptive gloom, bore an uncanny resemblance to several other inlets along that particular stretch of coastline. When the first faint rays of dawn pierced the pre-morning twilight, the heroes were dismayed to find themselves approaching what appeared to be an unmistakably hostile shoreline, where armed men were already assembling in formation, evidently poised to repel their landing. In the ethereal, dim illumination of the nascent morning, with tendrils of mist gracefully rising from the water's surface and obscuring crucial visual details that might otherwise have averted the impending tragedy, both disparate groups mistakenly identified the other as an adversary. The vigilant defenders positioned along the shore, observing a warship stealthily approaching under the partial shroud of darkness, immediately concluded they were confronting marauding raiders or opportunistic pirates bent on pillage and destruction. Conversely, the Argonauts, awakening to the disorienting sight of armed men shouting menacing threats and brandishing an array of weapons, became convinced they had either unwittingly stumbled into a cunning trap or had been perfidiously betrayed by supposed allies. The ensuing confrontation proved short-lived yet exceptionally brutal, as seasoned combatants from both factions engaged with an unparalleled ferocity, each convinced they were safeguarding their very existence and honour against an unwarranted assault. While the heroic Argonauts possessed advantages stemming from their superior training and advanced armaments, they were pitted against men intimately familiar with their native topography, fiercely defending their cherished homes and beloved kin, By the time the early morning mists sufficiently dissipated to allow mutual recognition, the irreversible damage had already been wrought. King Cyzicus lay lifeless upon the shoreline where he had valiantly fallen, spearheading his people's defence, and numerous other brave individuals from both contingents had perished in a lamentable clash that, in hindsight, ought never to have transpired. The stark awareness of the tragic events that had unfolded engendered a profound wellspring of remorse and sorrow within the Argonauts, casting a sombre pall over all their preceding exploits. Their initial ambition had been to embody the quintessential heroes, to achieve magnificent feats worthy of eternal commemoration and resounding acclamation. Instead, their very first significant encounter with unfamiliar people had culminated in the untimely demise of a youthful monarch whose sole transgression had been his earnest endeavour to shield his subjects. Jason, as the designated leader whose directives had inadvertently steered them toward this catastrophe, felt the immense burden of responsibility weigh particularly heavily upon his shoulders. The pragmatic elements of command, such as navigating treacherous waters, orchestrating the provision of sustenance, and coordinating the diverse crew, had previously appeared formidable, yet ultimately manageable. However, the intricate moral dilemmas inherent in leadership, the disquieting realization that even noble intentions could precipitate dire consequences, proved far more arduous to endure than any physical privation. The solemn obsequies for King Cyzicus were conducted with all the reverence befitting a fallen champion, but simultaneously served as poignant reminders of the grievous toll exacted by the grievous misunderstanding that had tragically extinguished his life. The Argonauts participated in these mournful rites with unfeigned grief and profound regret, comprehending instinctively that this harrowing tragedy would indelibly mark their consciousness throughout the remainder of their odyssey and beyond. The bereaved consort of King Cyzicus, now Queen Cleite, comported herself with remarkable grace and fortitude during these trying days, exhibiting no discernible animosity toward the valiant heroes who had inadvertently occasioned her husband's death. Her act of absolution was both magnanimous and heart-rending, serving as a powerful testament to how often epic sagas tend to overlook the innocent individuals who invariably suffer when extraordinary men pursue their fated destinies. Upon their eventual departure from the Dolione's verdant peninsula, the Argonauts carried with them a newly acquired, deeper comprehension of the profound responsibilities inextricably linked to their exceptional abilities and burgeoning reputation. Power and inherent prowess, they had now profoundly learned, bestowed not merely opportunities for glory, but also weighty obligations, and the repercussions of their actions extended far beyond the confines of their individual lives and personal aspirations. Their subsequent confrontation with perils of a supernatural nature materialized several weeks thereafter, when their vessel reached the remote coastline where the venerable, sightless seer Phineus had been unjustly incarcerated by the Olympian deities. This divine retribution was meted out as punishment for his transgression of divulging an excessive amount of sacred knowledge to mere mortals. His specific offence had involved forewarning individuals about impending dangers with such meticulous detail that it enabled them to circumvent the very punishments the gods had unequivocally intended for them to suffer. Phineus languished in an existence that was simultaneously pitiable and utterly terrifying, perpetually sustained in a state of unceasing hunger by the malevolent harpies. These formidable winged entities would descend from the heavens whenever sustenance was brought to him, either snatching away or deliberately contaminating his meagre meals before he could consume enough to assuage his profound needs. The harpies were not simply predatory creatures driven by instinctual hunger, but rather sagacious beings whose cruelty was both deliberate and meticulously calculated. They clearly revelled in their victims' prolonged torment, timing their predatory incursions to inflict the utmost frustration and abject despair. Their constant menacing presence had transmuted the natural pleasure of eating into an enduring source of profound anxiety and perpetual disappointment. When the Argonauts ultimately arrived at Phineus's desolate abode, they discovered the aged prophet in a wretched state that simultaneously evoked both deep compassion and chilling horror. He was severely emaciated from years of erratic nourishment. His garments were tattered and soiled, and his living quarters bore the unmistakable hallmarks of incessant disruption by creatures that seemed to relish in generating disorder and misery. Yet, despite his deplorable physical condition, Phineus remarkably retained the acute mental perspicacity and formidable prophetic faculties that had earned him renown throughout the ancient world. He immediately recognized the Argonauts and intuitively grasped the profound significance of their heroic quest, subsequently offering to furnish them with crucial intelligence that could facilitate their success, in exchange for their intervention against his supernatural tormentors. The ensuing skirmish with the Harpies necessitated innovative tactical approaches that ingeniously leveraged the heroes' diverse proficiencies and the unique operational capabilities of their vessel. Zates and Calais, the ethereal winged progeny of the Boreas, the North Wind, were the sole members of their intrepid crew who possessed the inherent to directly engage these formidable creatures within their native domain of the boundless sky and swirling air. The aerial dogfight that ensued was a breathtaking spectacle, both magnificent and terrifying, as the winged brethren relentlessly pursued the Harpies through intricate cloud formations and powerful wind currents that no ordinary mortal could possibly navigate. The battle traversed countless miles of the firmament, discernible from the ground as minute, agile figures darting and diving with the swift grace of swallows pursuing elusive insects. Simultaneously, the remaining heroes diligently established defensive positions around Phineus's dwelling, meticulously constructing barricades and protective shelters designed to safeguard the venerable prophet, even if the airborne champions proved unsuccessful in their relentless pursuit. Hercules, employing his prodigious strength, strategically maneuvered colossal stones into formidable protective configurations, while Atalanta's unparalleled archery prowess provided an additional, potent deterrent against any harpies that might conceivably elude the primary aerial chase. The ultimate resolution of this protracted conflict materialized through a negotiated settlement rather than an outright military triumph, as the divine powers intervened to delineate terms that judiciously balanced both immutable justice and compassionate mercy. The Harpies, in due course, consented to permanently cease their torment of Phineus, in return for solemn assurances that he would henceforth exercise greater discretion regarding the revelation of sacred divine secrets that mortals were explicitly not intended to comprehend. Liberated from his protracted supernatural persecution, Phineus proved to be an invaluable repository of sagacious information concerning the formidable challenges that lay in wait for the Argonauts. His prescient knowledge of future occurrences was, by divine decree, circumscribed by certain restrictions. Yet he was still capable of providing critical warnings about specific dangers and offering astute counsel regarding navigation through perilous regions where conventional maritime skills would prove utterly insufficient. Most crucially, he imparted to them vital intelligence about the dreaded Symplegades, the legendary clashing rocks that vigilantly guarded the perilous entrance to the Black Sea, and furnished them with indispensable details concerning the precise timing and intricate techniques that would be absolutely essential to navigate safely through that fabled hazard. As the Argonauts made their final preparations to recommence their epic voyage, they paused to reflect deeply upon the profound lessons garnered from their preceding encounters with both the Doliones and the Harpies. They had witnessed firsthand how effortlessly noble intentions could tragically culminate in profound sorrow. Yet they had also resoundingly demonstrated their inherent capacity to aid innocent victims of malevolent, supernatural persecution. The delicate equilibrium between these disparate experiences, the bitter taste of tragedy juxtaposed with the exhilaration of triumph, the sting of failure alongside the sweetness of success, was progressively emerging as a pivotal theme of their monumental quest. Heroism, they were gradually apprehending, was not merely a matter of achieving magnificent deeds and securing glorious victories, but also intrinsically involved accepting profound responsibility for one's missteps and diligently striving to rectify injustices wherever they were encountered. What profound wisdom, one might ponder, truly emerged from these crucible-like experiences, and how might the hero's burgeoning understanding of intricate moral complexity adequately equip them for the even more formidable challenges that undoubtedly awaited them in the uncharted, enigmatic waters ahead. Phineas had meticulously elucidated the rock's erratic behaviour with a level of detail that was simultaneously immensely beneficial and utterly terrifying. These colossal geological formations would remain perfectly inert for unpredictable durations, occasionally for several days or even weeks, thereby fostering the deceptive illusion that passage between them would be a safe and unremarkable routine. However, the moment any vessel drew sufficiently near to commit to the passage, the colossal rocks would suddenly converge with an overwhelming, thunderous force, mercilessly crushing anything unfortunate enough to be trapped within their vice-like grip. The intricate approach to the Symplegades, those legendary clashing rocks that stood sentinel at the gateway to the Black Sea, necessitated several arduous days of meticulous preparation and intense mental conditioning. This period rigorously tested the hero's unwavering ability to maintain profound concentration amidst extreme psychological pressure. These were not merely mundane navigational perils that could be circumvented through practiced skill and cautious manoeuvring, but rather formidable supernatural impediments that had, without exception, annihilated every single ship that had dared to attempt passage between them. The temporal mechanism governing this deadly phenomenon was distinctly irregular, yet emphatically not random. The rocks appeared to possess some uncanny form of supernatural sentience, enabling them to perceive approaching vessels and precisely calculate the exact moment when a collision would inflict the most devastating damage. Prior attempts at traversing this passage had invariably failed because the rocks demonstrated an uncanny ability to anticipate conventional navigation strategies and adjust their synchronized timing accordingly. However, Phineas had also providentially furnished information concerning a potential vulnerability within this seemingly impenetrable supernatural defense system. The rocks, he revealed, required a brief interval of recovery between successive collisions, a fleeting moment of susceptibility when they were temporarily incapable of instantly responding to emergent threats. If a ship could artfully trigger a collision and subsequently pass through during this brief recovery interlude, it might, against all odds, succeed where all others had previously met their doom. The intricate strategy the Argonauts devised demanded impeccable coordination among every single member of their dedicated crew, coupled with a timing precision that afforded absolutely no margin for error. Their plan involved cautiously approaching the formidable rocks, then dispatching a swift dove ahead of their vessel to intentionally activate the collision mechanism. Following this, they would endeavour to make their perilous passage during the fleeting window when the rocks were momentarily incapacitated and unable to react. The judicious selection of the specific dove for this pivotal test necessitated a scrupulous consideration of various factors that most ordinary individuals would scarcely contemplate. The chosen avian messenger needed to possess sufficient velocity to effectively trigger the rock's destructive response, yet not be so exceedingly swift that it could escape the impending collision before it occurred. Furthermore, it was imperative that the bird possessed enough intrinsic resilience to withstand the powerful pressure waves and violent air turbulence that would inevitably accompany the rock's cataclysmic movement. Orpheus meticulously composed a distinctive musical arrangement for the impending transit, crafting rhythms designed to facilitate the synchronized efforts of their rowing and to bolster their resolve during periods when apprehension might otherwise have incapacitated their endeavours. His profound comprehension of music's capacity to influence both corporeal exertion and psychological fortitude would prove indispensable amidst the formidable strain of their undertaking. The valiant Argonauts dedicated countless hours to deliberating and preparing for every conceivable facet of their perilous venture, ranging from the precise rowing techniques intended to yield maximal propulsion to the intricate emergency protocols they would enact should their meticulously laid plans falter. Each man was acutely aware of his specific duties during the pivotal moments that lay ahead, and they assiduously honed their collective coordination until their individual movements merged into a seamless, instinctual ballet. As the vessel drew nearer to the Symplegades, the heroes could discern the stark evidence of countless past failures strewn across the seabed beneath the remarkably clear waters. Shattered planks, remnants of cargo, and a plethora of other detritus formed a sombre underwater necropolis, serving as an ominous memento of the grim destiny that awaited them if their carefully devised strategy proved inadequate. The colossal rocks themselves presented an even more awe-inspiring and daunting spectacle than Phineas's vivid accounts had intimated. They ascended from the ocean's depths like towering monoliths, their formidable surfaces deeply etched and burnished by innumerable impacts, their very presence generating complex currents and turbulent wind patterns that rendered ordinary navigation arduous, even when the formations remained static. Tiphys scrutinized the intricate water movements around these colossal formations with the intense focus of one whose precise calculations would ultimately determine the survival or demise of his comrades. The aquatic flows were exceedingly convoluted and treacherous, possessing the power to divert their ship off course at the most inopportune instant. yet they simultaneously presented opportunities for masterful seamanship that could afford critical advantages. The liberation of the dove was an event simultaneously devoid of dramatic flourish and utterly terrifying. The diminutive avian companion soared towards the narrow chasm between the monolithic rocks with the guileless resolve of a creature utterly oblivious to the potent, supernatural forces it was poised to unleash. For a fleeting interval, an unsettling stillness prevailed, prompting the heroes to harbour anxieties that their intelligence might have been flawed, or that the formidable rocks had, by some arcane means, divined their cunning scheme. Then, the cataclysmic impact transpired with a ferocity that far surpassed their direst imaginings. The resultant sound was a terrifying fusion of thunderclap and seismic tremor, a reverberation so utterly overwhelming that it seemed to a man originate from within their very craniums rather than from the external environment. The very ocean itself quivered with the immense force of the collision, and formidable waves propagated outwards with a power that nearly engulfed their ship, despite the prudent distance they had endeavoured to maintain. The subsequent act of rowing demanded the most arduous physical exertion any of the Argonauts had ever endured. Every sinew strained to its absolute physiological limit. Every single breath was wholly consecrated to the singular imperative of propelling their vessel through the turbulent waters, still violently agitated from the rock's recent impact. Orpheus's melodic composition furnished the vital cadence that ensured their harmonious synchronization, yet each individual mariner was ultimately reliant upon his own intrinsic might and unyielding resolve. Remarkably, their intricate stratagem unfolded precisely as the seer Phineus had foretold. The small dove had been ensnared and summarily crushed between the colossal rocks, thereby activating the collision mechanism and initiating the crucial recovery phase during which a passage might conceivably be achieved. The intrepid heroes were granted perhaps a mere 30 seconds to traverse the critical expanse that separated them from the promise of sanctuary on the opposing side. As they rapidly converged upon the narrow aperture between the monolithic formations, the Argonauts could distinctly perceive the mounting pressure indicative of an impending second collision. The arcane, supernatural apparatus was rapidly re-energizing itself, poised to annihilate this latest audacious attempt at transit with the identical, devastating violence that had obliterated so many preceding vessels. Time was rapidly dwindling, and their ultimate triumph hinged entirely upon attaining safety before the sentient rocks could react to their presence. The subsequent collision, occurring immediately after their precarious passage, was astonishingly even more violent than its predecessor, as the immense rocks slammed together with an almost palpable frustration and fury, having been cruelly denied their intended victims. The resulting clamour was utterly deafening, and the immense pressure waves that emanated from the impact very nearly propelled the Argo stern first back into the lethal chasm she had only just miraculously navigated. The actual transit itself endured for a mere handful of seconds, yet those fleeting moments encapsulated an entire lifetime of profound terror and electrifying exhilaration. The formidable rocks loomed precipitously above them like colossal escarpments, their surfaces so alarmingly proximate that the heroes could discern individual abrasions and discolorations left by prior, devastating impacts. The water within the narrow channel was tempestuous and perilous, yet it simultaneously represented the sole conduit to salvation, provided they could sustain their velocity and precise trajectory. But they had, against all odds, triumphed. The Argo emerged from the treacherous passage, visibly battered, yet structurally sound, her crew utterly spent but unequivocally victorious, now sailing into the vast expanse of the Black Sea through an entrance that no other ship had ever successfully traversed before. Behind them, the formidable Symplegades had forever ceased their ceaseless menacing motion, their profound supernatural purpose finally fulfilled now that a single vessel had successfully overcome their formidable challenge. Jason experienced a singular sensation of profound relief and immense accomplishment, not merely for their collective survival, but because his leadership had been stringently tested under the most dire and extreme circumstances imaginable, and had not been found wanting. The crushing burden of responsibility for 50 human lives during those critical, harrowing moments had been overwhelming, yet he had steadfastly maintained his focus and made the decisive choices that ultimately culminated in their resounding success. The celebration that ensued after their triumph was a curious blend of unbridled joy and profound solemnity, as the heroes savoured their hard-won victory, while simultaneously grasping the terrifying proximity to which they had come to sharing the grim fate of countless previous challengers. The precarious margin separating triumph from catastrophic failure had been quantifiable in mere seconds and inches, serving as a stark and enduring reminder of how exquisitely narrow the boundary between extraordinary heroism and profound tragedy often proves to be. The successful navigation of the Symplegades signified a pivotal turning point in their epic voyage, both in a literal geographical sense and in a profound metaphorical context. They had transcended the familiar confines of known waters and ventured into the uncharted mysteries of the Black Sea, but more significantly, they had conclusively demonstrated their inherent capability to surmount challenges that had irrevocably defeated every prior attempt. Their collective self-assurance and unwavering belief in the righteousness of their quest had been immeasurably fortified by their extraordinary success in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The prophetic talking beam embedded within their ship's prow broke its silence for the first time in days, its prescient voice conveying both dire admonition and profound encouragement in equal measure. Great challenges await, it resounded, but also immense opportunities. The momentous choices you are destined to make in the lands ahead will determine not merely your success, but the very essence of the heroes you are destined to become. As they navigated further into the expansive Black Sea, leaving the vanquished, defeated rocks far astern, the heroes began to intuitively sense that they were rapidly approaching the most perilous and momentous phase of their grand adventure. The relatively facile victories now lay firmly in their past, and directly ahead lay the enigmatic land of Colchis, where the formidable King Aeetes awaited, presenting challenges that would rigorously test not only their ingrained courage and honed skill, but also their burgeoning understanding of justice, loyalty, and the profound, authentic meaning of heroism. What profound transformations, one might ponder, had these crucible-like trials forged within the very hearts and minds of these valiant heroes? And how would their ever-growing wisdom serve them when they confronted the ultimate trial of their quest in the magical fabled kingdom that lay just beyond the horizon? The distant coastline of Colchis materialized through the ethereal morning mist, resembling an ethereal vision from a dream, its unfamiliar geographical contours and lush, exotic vegetation collectively creating an indelible impression of profound mystery and latent peril, setting it distinctly apart from any land the heroes had previously encountered. The very atmosphere here seemed fundamentally altered, thick with pervasive humidity and redolent with strange, unfamiliar scents that hinted at the existence of flora and fauna entirely unknown in the familiar Mediterranean world. As the Argo progressively neared the bustling harbour of the capital city, the Argonauts could plainly discern unmistakable evidence of a prosperity and sophisticated development that considerably surpassed their initial expectations. The extensive docks were robustly constructed and teemed with fervent commercial activity, while the impressive edifices visible beyond the waterfront showcased architectural styles that were both strikingly grand and utterly alien to conventional Greek aesthetic sensibilities. King Aeetes' dominion was unequivocally a wealthy and meticulously organized realm, sustained through extensive trade networks that extended far into distant Asia, and buttressed by advanced agricultural methodologies that skillfully exploited the region's exceptionally favourable climate and fertile soil. This was manifestly not a rudimentary barbarian kingdom that could be readily intimidated or effortlessly impressed by a contingent of visiting heroes, but rather a highly refined civilization possessing its own deeply ingrained traditions and formidable sources of power. The harbour officials who greeted the approaching Argo were impeccably courteous yet conspicuously guarded, clearly accustomed to the arrival of foreign visitors, but simultaneously acutely vigilant regarding potential threats to their kingdom's national security. They posed incisive, detailed inquiries concerning the hero's origins and stated objectives, diligently recording notes that would, without question, be expeditiously relayed to the royal authorities before any formal audiences could possibly be arranged. While these intricate diplomatic protocols were meticulously observed, the intrepid heroes seized valuable opportunities to closely observe the rhythms of daily life within this distant kingdom, and to fully appreciate the pronounced distinctions between Colchian and Hellenic customs. The indigenous people they encountered were generally affable but notably reserved, willing to engage in fundamental commercial transactions, but scrupulously cautious not to divulge any intelligence that might potentially jeopardize their kingdom's strategic interests. The advanced agricultural practices visibly implemented across the expansive countryside surrounding the bustling city were particularly striking to heroes who had matured amidst the comparatively arid landscapes of mainland Greece. Here, intricate irrigation systems, which must have necessitated generations of painstaking construction and meticulous maintenance, sustained a profusion of crops that flourished with luxurious abundance in vast fields that stretched seemingly to the very horizon. Jason was profoundly impacted by the dawning realization that King Aeetes presided over an abundance of resources and a significant populace that rendered him considerably more potent than the vast majority of Greek monarchs. The fabled golden fleece, while undeniably precious, was evidently but a single treasure amidst the myriad riches of a kingdom that had demonstrably thrived for centuries, without needing to concern itself with the audacious ambitions of distant heroes. The royal decree, a formal request for their presence at the palace, reached the heroes on their second day anchored in the bustling port, It was conveyed by a retinue of messengers whose opulent attire and meticulously observed courtesies vividly underscored King Aetz's profound regard for established decorum and ceremonial propriety. The distinguished guests were thereby extended an invitation to present themselves before the monarch, where they would be afforded the esteemed opportunity to articulate the precise nature of their mission and formally solicit permission to advance their arduous quest. The very edifice of the palace upon their arrival unfolded in a grandeur so astonishing it utterly defied the Argonauts' preconceived notions regarding what they had perhaps imagined to be the primitive characteristics of distant foreign realms. Its architectural design exhibited an unparalleled sophistication and refined elegance, seamlessly integrating construction materials and innovative techniques utterly unknown within the Hellenic world. Furthermore, the interior adornments were a resplendent testament to an abundance of wealth and a pinnacle of artistic accomplishment that stood in proud rivalry to anything they had ever witnessed in their cherished homeland. King Aeetes himself received the delegation within a majestic throne room, a space unequivocally conceived to overwhelm and impress all visitors with the formidable might and unquestionable sovereignty of the Colchian monarchy. The king, a figure of considerable and commanding presence, occupied that prime stage of life where the accumulated wisdom of experience and the undiminished vigour of maturity converged to forge an inherent and formidable leadership authority. What rendered the monarch particularly daunting was not merely his vast political sway or his innate regal bearing, but rather the subtle yet unmistakable manifestations of arcane abilities that shimmered around him, almost like an ethereal static charge. Miniature, lambent flames capriciously danced between his fingers as he articulated his words, and his eyes, deep and unfathomable, hinted at an intimate acquaintance with supernatural forces far beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals. Jason, leader of the Argonauts, presented his earnest petition for the right to attempt the recovery of the legendary Golden Fleece, delivering his request with every ounce of diplomatic finesse and respectful deference he could possibly muster. However, King Aeetes' immediate rejoinder made it unequivocally clear that this endeavour would not simply be a straightforward matter of royal assent, followed by a conventional heroic escapade. The shrewd monarch harboured his own distinct and formidable conceptions concerning the appropriate trials and formidable challenges that ought to be imposed upon any foreign heroes audacious enough to seek the fabled treasures held within his sovereign dominion. The Golden Fleece, Aeetes elucidated, his voice laced with a subtle smile that seemed to hint at layers of concealed meanings and deeper implications, resides within my most hallowed grove, perpetually safeguarded by a magnificent dragon that has never, in its long existence, known the sweet oblivion of slumber. Over the passage of countless years, a multitude of heroes have cast covetous glances upon it. Their very bones now serve to enrich the fertile soil beneath the ancient trees where the fleece hangs, a grim testament to their ambition and ultimate failure. But before Jason could even contemplate confronting the formidable serpentine guardian, he would first be compelled to demonstrate his profound worthiness by successfully undertaking 3 formidable tasks that the king himself would meticulously devise for him. These were emphatically not the conventional trials of sheer physical prowess or raw courage that heroes typically encountered. Instead, They were challenges intricately interwoven with the vast magical resources at Aeetes, absolute command, deliberately engineered to be utterly beyond the successful completion of any mortal hero. The inaugural task presented an almost insurmountable ordeal, the yoking and subsequent ploughing of fields with the king's legendary bronze bulls, creatures whose very breath issued forth as scorching flames, and whose mighty hooves struck incandescent sparks from the unyielding stone. These were no mere terrestrial animals amenable to conventional methods of taming or handling. Rather, they were supernatural entities, beings of pure myth, whose indomitable will had never once been successfully subjugated by human dominion. Jason, striving valiantly to conceal the profound dismay that gripped him, listened intently to the excruciating details of this formidable challenge. How, he must have silently pondered, could one possibly yoke beasts whose exhalations possessed the power to liquefy metal? How could any mortal hope to maintain control over creatures capable of incinerating anyone who dared approach within striking distance? The sheer nature of the task appeared to have been meticulously crafted, not as a test of his capabilities, but as an explicit design to ensure his swift and agonizing demise. The second arduous task, the monarch declared, would immediately follow the first, the meticulous sewing of dragon's teeth into the furrows freshly carved by the fiery bronze bulls. These were not metaphorical, but actual teeth, purportedly extracted from some primordial colossal serpent, each one intricately carved with ancient unsettling symbols that caused a visceral discomfort to merely gaze upon them directly. Furthermore, they would require planting according to precise, arcane patterns that the king himself would impart. Yet the third task, perhaps the most malevolent of all, promised a truly horrific conclusion. The dragon's teeth, once carefully planted in the soil that had been tilled by the monstrous bronze bulls, would not merely germinate, but would instantaneously sprout into fully armed warriors, not living men of flesh and blood, but animated skeletons, whose singular, unyielding purpose was to ruthlessly slay whoever had been responsible for their creation. These spectral combatants would erupt from the very earth, already fully equipped with weaponry and armour, their every fibre imbued with an uncompromising hostility, knowing nothing but the insatiable desire to utterly annihilate their planter. All three tasks must be flawlessly completed within the span of a single day, Aeetes appended, his tone chillingly casual, as if the preceding challenges were not already sufficiently impossible. From the first blush of sunrise until the deepening hues of sunset. Should you commence your labours late, proceed with undue slowness, or falter with hesitation at any juncture, the encroaching darkness will inevitably descend before your monumental undertaking is finished. Failure to successfully accomplish all three formidable tasks before the advent of nightfall will unequivocally result in your death. The other Argonauts, gathered around their leader, absorbed this daunting inventory of seemingly insurmountable challenges with an escalating anxiety for Jason's personal safety and the ultimate triumph of their collective mission. These were clearly not trials that could be overcome through the conventional heroic virtues of sheer courage and brute strength. Rather, they were deeply magical challenges, demanding nothing less than supernatural intervention and divine assistance for any hope of survival. Jason, maintaining an outward facade of stoic composure, accepted the king's unyielding conditions, fully comprehending that any refusal would signify the immediate failure of their sacred quest and, in all probability, lead to the imprisonment or even the execution of his loyal companions. Privately, however, his mind raced, meticulously calculating the grim odds of survival, and finding them discouragingly, almost impossibly low. That very evening, as the weary heroes convened to discuss their dire predicament within the designated quarters provided for them, the atmosphere was palpably sombre and permeated with an escalating sense of desperation. They had journeyed too far, endured too many hardships, and surmounted too many formidable obstacles to now contemplate abandoning their sacred quest, especially when the challenges that lay ahead appeared genuinely insurmountable through any conventional means at their immediate disposal. It was precisely during this pervasive period of profound discouragement that an unforeseen ally emerged from the very heart of the royal household itself. Princess Medea, the illustrious daughter of King Aeetes, possessed an extraordinary and profound knowledge of potent herbs and intricate magical arts, a unique skill set that could potentially furnish solutions to problems that seemed utterly intractable through ordinary conventional approaches. However, her invaluable assistance would come at a steep personal cost, one that would ultimately prove far more exacting than any of them could possibly fathom at that particular moment: the enduring bonds of love and unwavering loyalty. They were on the precipice of discovering that such emotional commitments could engender obligations and intricate complications far more binding than any physical chains, and infinitely more perilous than even the most fearsome fire-breathing monster. As Jason wrestled with the elusive grasp of sleep on the eve of his impossible tasks, his mind was tormented by a profound doubt. Had he, in his unwavering pursuit of a legendary treasure, inadvertently led his cherished companions to their inevitable doom for a prize that might ultimately prove utterly unworthy of the exorbitant price they would undoubtedly have to pay? The coming dawn would usher in either a glorious triumph or an unmitigated disaster. Yet, regardless of the outcome, one truth remained starkly clear: nothing would ever again be the same. One might ponder what unsettling dreams might have haunted a hero, on the cusp of confronting challenges that seemed meticulously crafted by a deity possessing a particularly cruel and ironic sense of humour. And what profound, enduring hopes could possibly sustain an individual when the very odds against success loomed overwhelmingly, threatening to crush the spirit? Her intimate understanding of the healing properties of herbs and the ancient art of medicine had its genesis in her tender childhood, a period when her sagacious grandmother would frequently lead her on extended, contemplative walks through the luxuriant palace gardens. During these excursions, she was meticulously instructed to identify a myriad of plants by their distinctive leaves, their unique aromatic profiles, and, crucially, the specific times of day when their medicinal efficacy reached its zenith. In those formative years, these lessons had appeared to her as nothing more than enchanting games, the joyful discovery of the mint that brought solace to an upset stomach, the patient discernment of which delicate flowers could assuage persistent headaches, and the profound revelation of roots that could gently guide troubled souls into a peaceful, restorative slumber through the darkest of nights. Princess Medea had observed the entire audience from her concealed vantage point behind an intricately carved screen, her dark, perceptive eyes meticulously scrutinizing these foreign heroes with the focused intensity of someone rigorously trained to observe and analytically assess. She was far more than a mere princess idly enjoying the spectacle of courtly ceremonies. She was a woman whose extensive education had encompassed a breadth of esoteric knowledge that remarkably few individuals, male or female, ever managed to acquire in the ancient world. As Jason grappled with the daunting contemplation of the impossible tasks that King Aeetes had so mercilessly imposed upon him, the immense burden of his leadership role pressed down upon his shoulders, a tangible weight, much like a heavy, suffocating cloak on a sweltering day. The fiery bronze bulls, the malevolent dragon's teeth, the menacing armed warriors, each individual challenge seemed meticulously engineered not merely to test the limits of heroism, but rather to unequivocally ensure his demise. Yet, even as despair threatened to consume him, in the hushed, winding corridors of the royal palace, where the soft glow of oil lamps cast long, gentle shadows upon the polished marble walls, an unexpected source of aid was already imperceptibly moving towards him. The venerable art of ancient medicine, as practiced by Medea, transcended the simplistic memorization of which specific plants yielded which particular effects. It necessitated a profound comprehension of the subtle, intricate relationships that existed between diverse organic substances, an innate awareness of how the ethereal phases of the moon profoundly influenced the potency and efficacy of certain specialized preparations, and, most importantly, the cultivated ability to intuitively sense the invisible, interconnected forces that bound all living things together in complex patterns, forces that could be influenced and guided, yet never entirely mastered or controlled. Medea's private workshop was strategically situated within a secluded tower room, offering an expansive view overlooking the vibrant palace gardens. This location provided her with convenient access to freshly cultivated ingredients and, crucially, ensured an abundance of natural light, essential for the meticulous and precise work her intricate preparations demanded. The chamber itself was replete with an array of clay vessels, each carefully filled with an assortment of dried herbs, alongside sturdy stone mortars designed for grinding raw ingredients into fine powders. Among her tools were bronze scales of such exquisite sensitivity that they could accurately measure quantities smaller than a single grain of sand. However, as Medea matured into womanhood, her education had progressively expanded far beyond the realm of rudimentary household remedies, venturing deeply into spheres of knowledge that unequivocally bordered on the supernatural and the arcane. She had assiduously learned to formulate complex compounds capable of significantly bolstering human courage, to concoct potent mixtures that conferred remarkable protection against the searing effects of fire and intense heat, and, most astonishingly, to synthesize substances possessing the profound ability to influence the very behavior of animals, even those of a magical and formidable nature, such as her formidable father's bronze bulls. The numerous shelves that meticulously lined the walls of her workshop were laden with an extensive collection of bottles, each containing precious oils and tinctures that had been carefully aging for many years, slowly developing the concentrated potency that rendered them extraordinarily effective for the most challenging and intractable cases. Every single container was meticulously labelled in her precise, careful handwriting, bearing detailed notes regarding the exact date of its preparation, the specific botanical ingredients that had been utilised, and, crucially, the precise lunar conditions under which the intricate alchemical work had been performed. When she resolved to provide assistance to Jason, her decision was not merely a sudden whim born of an ardent romantic fervour, but rather a meticulously considered judgment rooted in her thorough evaluation of his intrinsic character and the undeniable equity of his daunting cause. She had attentively absorbed the narrative of his trials, closely observed his interactions and treatment of his companions, and ultimately concluded that he was indeed worthy of her succour in confronting the exorbitant demands laid forth by her father. Yet, beyond the tangible implements and potent ingredients, Medea possessed an extraordinary faculty that could neither be imparted nor acquired through academic pursuit alone. A profound, intuitive comprehension of the esoteric linkages between the botanical realm, the animal kingdom, and the very essence of humanity, enabling her to formulate ingenious remedies for predicaments that appeared utterly insurmountable through conventional approaches. The initial encounter between Jason and Medea was carefully orchestrated through a network of trusted emissaries, individuals whose discretion was beyond reproach. Their clandestine meeting transpired within a secluded garden pavilion, where the gentle murmur of a flowing fountain served as a natural screen, effectively masking their hushed conversation from any potential eavesdroppers. Here the rigid, courtly strictures of the palace could be sufficiently relaxed, fostering an environment conducive to candid dialogue. Jason's initial perception of the princess was not primarily one of superficial beauty, but rather of keen intelligence and formidable competence. She posed incisive inquiries regarding the formidable tasks he was destined to undertake, listening to his responses with the rapt attention of someone meticulously dissecting a complex problem demanding precise, tailored solutions. Her astute questioning unveiled a profound understanding of her father's arcane abilities, an insight that far exceeded anything an outsider could possibly have surmised. The remedies she proposed, though requiring components and preparations utterly beyond Jason's capacity to procure or fashion independently, were elegant in their ingenious simplicity. For instance, to safeguard him against the bronze bull's incendiary exhalations, she committed to concocting a protective balm, a powerful unguent derived from salamander oil, and an array of other pyro-repellent compounds, which would grant him safe passage to approach the colossal creatures. The salamander oil itself stood out as arguably the most uncommon constituent in her proposed antidote, painstakingly extracted from creatures native to the fiery volcanic territories beyond the borders of Colchis, beings capable of thriving in temperatures that would prove instantly lethal to common fauna. The collection of this potent oil was bound by very precise parameters, necessitating its harvest during specific lunar cycles and demanding specialized processing techniques that had been refined and passed down through generations by adepts of fire magic. The formidable challenge of mastering the bulls themselves necessitated an altogether different methodology, one that shrewdly leveraged their preternatural essence rather than directly combating it. Medea elucidated that these mystical beasts reacted to particular scents and specific auditory stimuli in ways that were entirely predictable and, crucially, manipulable by an individual who comprehended their enchanted origins. Indeed, Medea had inherited a valuable supply of this potent elixir from her venerable grandmother, accompanied by meticulous directives for its optimal deployment. when blended with select herbs known to fortify mortal bravery and substances affording protection against malevolent supernatural forces, it would create a formidable preparation capable of shielding Jason from the most perilous faculties of the bronze bulls. When the armed figures manifest from the furrows you have tilled, she elucidated, her voice subtle yet imbued with unwavering assurance, you must instantly hurl stones into their very midst. They will, in their single-minded fury, presume these projectiles were cast by their own comrades in arms, and their rage will then be redirected, turning them against each other rather than against you. The sowing of the dragon's teeth presented the most intricate predicament, as it was destined to inevitably engender combat-ready warriors, whose sole objective was the annihilation of whoever had planted them. Yet Medea possessed an arcane technique for subverting this magical curse, employing the warriors' focused hostility to ensure their reciprocal annihilation. She would also furnish him with a pulverized mixture crafted from herbs that flourished exclusively within hallowed groves, plants that had, through eons of ritualistic use, absorbed profound divine influences. When strewn upon the earth near the bulls, this potent powder would establish an ambient atmosphere that effectively pacified their aggressive impulses, rendering them more amenable to human directives. The pulverizing of the various ingredients was meticulously performed with lineous pestles rather than metallic implements, a deliberate choice to avoid disturbing the subtle ethereal vibrations that endowed the concoctions with their efficacy. The blending process took place within earthenware vessels that had been consecrated by hierophants and were strictly reserved from all mundane uses. Even the water incorporated into the procedure originated from sacred founts, whose inherent properties were believed to amplify, rather than attenuate, the intrinsic power of the herbs. The intricate formulations that Medea devised for Jason demanded 3 days of diligent effort within her secluded tower laboratory. Each individual compound had to be prepared at precise junctures, under specific climatological states, with an exacting attention to particulars that would undoubtedly have appeared utterly superstitious to anyone unacquainted with the foundational tenets of magical medicine. This particular strategy for the warriors called for impeccable synchronization and considerable personal bravery, for Jason would need to remain sufficiently proximate to the materializing combatants to cast his stones with unerring precision, yet simultaneously distant enough to avoid becoming embroiled in the internecine battle that would inevitably ensue. It was in essence a solution that relied as much on astute psychological insight as it did on esoteric wisdom. The profound instruction Jason received during those 3 days proved as invaluable as the enchanted preparations themselves. He began to perceive the terrestrial sphere as an intricate tapestry of interdependent energies, forces that could be comprehended and judiciously swayed by individuals possessing the requisite knowledge and a deep reverence for the potent powers they were wielding. But perhaps more crucially, he commenced to grasp that Medea's succor was accompanied by commitments that extended far beyond the immediate challenge of accomplishing his immediate labours. She was not merely furnishing arcane support to an alien champion, but forging a binding pact that would profoundly alter the trajectories of both their lives. As she toiled, Medea elucidated to Jason the fundamental principles underpinning her artistry, generously imparting wisdom that was customarily transmitted solely within the bloodlines of curers and sorcerers. She meticulously described how diverse botanical specimens absorbed and intensified various forms of ethereal power, how the exact juncture of harvest directly influenced the potency of the ingredients, and how the very intentions of the alchemist profoundly shaped the ultimate concoction's utility. Jason acceded to her stipulations without fully comprehending their complete ramifications. In the pressing imperative of readying himself for his trials, he remained fixated on the proximate difficulties, neglecting to contemplate the far-reaching repercussions of accepting aid from an enchantress whose expertise stemmed from traditions that the majority of the Hellenic world would deem perilous and fundamentally anomalous. On the eve of his formidable trial, as Jason meticulously applied the balms and arranged the compounds that would safeguard him from conflagration and assist him in mastering preternatural beings, he found himself pondering the unusual trajectory his quest had taken. He had anticipated confronting his obstacles through the application of conventional valorous attributes, personal bravery, physical might, and an innate proficiency in arms. Instead, he now discovered his reliance upon esoteric lore and potent elements that functioned by tenets he scarcely comprehended. The princess had stipulated unequivocally that her assistance hinged upon his solemn promise to accompany her. Once the Argonauts departed from Colchis, she understood she could not possibly remain within her father's dominion after compromising his authority, and she harboured no inclination to pass her days as a political prisoner within the very palace of her birth. This impending transformation was both pragmatic and ideological. The enchanted elixirs would enable him to endure confrontations that would otherwise signify inevitable demise. Yet they also symbolized an alternative conception of valor than the one he had imbibed from Chiron. Rather than tackling challenges through overt conflict, he would surmount them via comprehension and adjustment. As Jason retired to his couch on that ultimate night of readiness, his thoughts were occupied not merely with apprehension regarding the forthcoming trials, but with profound inquiries concerning the woman whose profound knowledge would facilitate his triumph. What manner of existence had engendered such remarkable faculties? What ancient customs and sagacious mentors had moulded her comprehension of forces that remained utterly enigmatic to most people? Medea's farewell admonitions, delivered before the dawn of his tasks, conveyed both solace and a crucial caveat. The preparations will protect you and help you succeed, she affirmed. But remember that sorcery does not supplant sagacity and valor. The ointments will shield you from fire, but you must still possess the fortitude to draw near the bulls. The powders will pacify their belligerents, but you must still exhibit the proficiency to harness and command them. And perhaps most fundamentally, what profound significance did it hold that his valorous expedition now relied upon wisdom and succour that emanated from entirely outside the Greek tradition, a heritage he had consistently deemed preeminent over all foreign customs? The resolution of that query would irrevocably redefine his perception of heroism, knowledge, and the intricate interconnections between diverse cultures and their unique traditions. The colossal bronze bulls lay in wait for him within a field that had been designated precisely for this ordeal, its earth already tilled and primed for cultivation, its perimeters delineated by massive stones etched with symbols that caused immediate discomfort to the eye. The creatures themselves were at once splendid and fearsome, their metallic hides gleaming resplendently in the morning's illumination, their fiery exhalations forming ephemeral vapours that bore the distinct aroma of smelting furnaces and molten metal. The morning that heralded Jason's formidable trials dawned with an almost deceptive tranquillity, casting the heavens in delicate hues of rose and shimmering gold, offering no premonition of the profound supernatural perils that lay in wait. As he meticulously prepared himself in the hushed pre-dawn gloom, carefully applying the potent protective ointments that Medea had painstakingly instructed him to use, Jason keenly felt the immense burden of 50 human lives resting squarely upon the outcome of his endeavours in the critical hours ahead. As Jason advanced towards the monstrous creatures fortified by Medea's mystical unguents and carrying her arcane powders, he could discern the intense, searing heat emanating from their colossal bodies, palpable even at a distance of several yards. These were unequivocally not mere beasts that coincidentally exhaled fire, but rather formidable supernatural entities whose very existence flagrantly defied the established laws governing the intricate balance between living organisms and their surrounding environment. The arduous task of ploughing itself transcended a mere chore, evolving into a profound contemplation on the intricate interplay between human ambition and the formidable forces of nature. As Jason expertly guided the supernatural creatures through the furrows, which were destined to soon yield a crop of armed combatants, each resolute step forward propelled him closer to the successful completion of the initial challenge, yet simultaneously brought him nearer to the ominous dragon's teeth, securely contained within the leather pouch at his side. The heavy yoke, essential for harnessing these beasts, had been meticulously forged from materials capable of withstanding their scorching breath, though its considerable weight still demanded immense physical prowess to skillfully maneuver into its proper position. Similarly, the plough itself was robustly reinforced, specifically engineered to carve deep furrows into soil that had been rendered unyielding by prolonged exposure to supernatural heat. Despite these formidable enhancements, it remained, at its core, an agricultural implement that necessitated both considerable skill and practical experience for its effective operation. Through the efficacy of Medea's meticulous preparations, the formidable bulls submitted to the yoke with a surprising docility, displaying no more resistance than might be expected from common oxen. Their inherent supernatural aggression, quelled by the sacred powers she had bestowed, was significantly diminished, yet even in this subdued state, their raw power remained a breathtaking spectacle. Controlling their immense movements as they strained against the heavy plough demanded a formidable combination of strength and unwavering determination, pushing Jason to the very precipice of his physical capabilities. Once the expansive field had been thoroughly prepared and meticulously readied, Jason commenced the intricate and delicate procedure of sewing the dragon's teeth, adhering precisely to the complex pattern that King Aeetes had explicitly delineated. Each individual tooth necessitated careful placement at exact intervals, requiring an unwavering attention to minute details that, on the surface, might have appeared arbitrary, but were undeniably crucial to the unfolding magical transformation that was destined to ensue. The teeth themselves were profoundly unsettling artifacts, appearing to pulsate with a palpable malevolent energy as he grasped them. They were noticeably larger than ordinary teeth, intricately carved with enigmatic symbols that seemed to subtly shift adjust and reconfigure when observed from varying perspectives, and they possessed an inexplicable warmth to the touch, despite having been carefully preserved in cool storage for a great many years. No sooner had the very last tooth been meticulously planted than the earth itself began to stir with an unsettling, unnatural undulation that steadily escalated into a violent and widespread upheaval. The dragon's teeth were sprouting with an astonishing, supernatural celerity, forcefully breaching the soil that should have held them captive, rapidly coalescing into fully formed humanoid figures that emerged, inexplicably bearing weapons and clad in armor that had somehow materialized in conjunction with their skeletal bodies. Jason, meticulously adhering to Medea's precise instructions, hurled heavy stones into the burgeoning ranks of the emerging warriors before they could coalesce into any semblance of an organized fighting force. This ingenious strategy functioned with the exactitude she had foretold, ingeniously redirecting their singular, inherent aggression against one another, as they erroneously concluded that the projectiles had been cast by their fellow combatants. The ensuing battle, though remarkably brief, was nonetheless spectacular in its ferocity, as the skeletal fighters systematically annihilated each other with the same relentless efficiency they would have otherwise directed towards Jason. Within minutes, the field was strewn with a chaotic detritus of broken bones and shattered weaponry, every vestige of the supernatural threat having been utterly eradicated by their own tragically misdirected fury. King Aeetes observed these unfolding events from a grand pavilion, thoughtfully erected at a secure distance from the field, his countenance progressively darkening with each successful completion of a task by Jason. The monarch had meticulously engineered these challenges to be insurmountable, and their triumphant resolutions signified not only the imminent loss of the Golden Fleece, but also a direct and undeniable challenge to his sovereign authority, a defeat inflicted by foreign heroes. That very evening, as Jason and his stalwart companions revelled in their hard-won victory, Medea delivered unsettling tidings concerning her father's true intentions. Aeetes harboured no genuine intention of honouring his solemn agreement to relinquish the Golden Fleece. Instead, he was cunningly devising a plan to launch a surprise assault on the Argonauts as they slept, thereby eliminating them as perceived threats to his kingdom and his wounded pride. "We must take decisive action tonight," she emphatically urged. "While my father remains under the misapprehension that you are resting and celebrating your achievements, the Golden Fleece hangs suspended within the sacred grove of Ares, vigilantly guarded by a dragon that has never known the solace of sleep. However, I possess the knowledge and means to subdue even that formidable guardian, provided you possess the requisite courage to accompany me into the depths of the encroaching darkness." The decision to attempt the immediate clandestine acquisition of the Golden Fleece was simultaneously a pragmatic necessity and a morally intricate dilemma. Jason and his companions had, without question, fulfilled all the arduous conditions that Aeetes had imposed. However, the king's unequivocal refusal to uphold his side of the bargain unequivocally justified their recourse to stealth, to seize by covert means what should have been freely surrendered. Medea, however, approached this monstrous guardian without a flicker of apprehension, carrying a collection of potent herbs and specialized preparations designed to induce slumber, even in creatures cursed to perpetual wakefulness. Her melodious song, rendered in a soft, profoundly hypnotic cadence, combined with the potent scents and inherent properties of her magical substances, began to gradually erode the dragon's supernatural alertness. The hallowed grove where the golden fleece was enshrined lay several miles distant from the bustling city, its access restricted to winding, labyrinthine paths that snaked through dense forests where ordinary travellers would swiftly become disoriented and lost. Medea, guided by a profound familiarity, confidently led them through this intricate maze, moving with an almost ethereal silence through moonlit clearings where ancient, towering trees formed majestic, cathedral-like chambers filled with an aura of mysterious shadows. The colossal dragon that served as the unwavering guardian of the golden fleece was arguably the most magnificent and terrifying creature any of the heroes had ever encountered. Its formidable scales gleamed like burnished bronze under the pale moonlight, and its piercing eyes glowed with an intelligence that was unmistakably supernatural. Its sheer size was so immense that its powerful coils could have effortlessly crushed their entire vessel without the slightest exertion. The golden fleece itself surpassed in beauty and intrinsic value anything Jason had envisioned during the many arduous months of questing that had ultimately led them to this pivotal moment. It hung gracefully from the gnarled branches of an ancient oak tree, its lustrous wool catching and reflecting the moonlight in mesmerizing patterns that seemed to shimmer and dance with an inherent, internal luminescence. As Jason meticulously detached the fleece from its ancient resting place, exercising extreme caution not to disturb the slumbering dragon or inflict any damage upon the precious wool, he found himself reflecting on the incredibly long and arduous journey that had culminated in this precise moment. The epic quest, which had its origins in a cryptic prophecy and the seemingly innocuous loss of a sandal, was now reaching its dramatic climax within a moonlit grove, a place where potent magic and valiant heroism converged in ways that fundamentally challenged all his preconceived notions about the very nature of heroic achievement. Yet, beyond its undeniable material value, the fleece represented something far more profound, a sacred conduit to divine forces and ancient powers that had indelibly shaped the primordial history of the Greek people. This was not merely a treasure to be pilfered and bartered, but a hallowed artifact whose possession conferred responsibilities and obligations that extended immeasurably beyond its mere monetary worth. The return journey to their waiting ship was fraught with an almost unbearable tension as they traversed hostile territory, burdened with their stolen treasure, all the while knowing they were pursued by the royal forces that were rapidly mobilizing to thwart their escape. Medea's presence proved absolutely indispensable, not solely for her intimate knowledge of secret shortcuts and safe passages, but critically, for her extraordinary ability to deploy magical techniques designed to disorient their pursuers and significantly impede their pursuit. The Argonauts toiled with a desperate, frantic efficiency to prepare their vessel for an immediate departure, swiftly loading essential supplies and critical equipment while simultaneously maintaining a vigilant watch for the inevitable arrival of the royal forces poised to prevent their escape. Every fleeting moment of delay magnified the inherent danger, yet a hasty or incomplete preparation risked catastrophic mishaps at sea that would render their daring theft of the golden fleece utterly meaningless. As the Argo finally pulled away from the Colchian harbour, her sails billowing majestically with favourable winds that might have been a natural phenomenon, or perhaps subtly influenced by Medea's potent magical abilities, Jason stood at the stern, his gaze fixed upon the receding lights of the kingdom as they faded into the encroaching darkness. They had undeniably succeeded in their primary mission, yet the profound and far-reaching costs of that triumph were only just beginning to manifest themselves. The Golden Fleece lay securely ensconced within the Argo's most fortified storage compartment, its golden walls still radiating with the inherent inner light that unequivocally marked it as something infinitely more significant than mere earthly treasure. However, Jason was gradually beginning to comprehend that its possession was merely the prelude to a lifetime of profound responsibilities that would irrevocably shape the remainder of his existence. Medea stood silently beside him, no longer a princess within her father's grand palace, but now a refugee, one who had selflessly sacrificed everything to aid foreign heroes in achieving their ambitious goals. Her continued presence aboard their ship symbolized not just a source of invaluable magical assistance for future challenges, but also served as a poignant, living embodiment of the intricate and often burdensome obligations that truly heroic actions forge between individuals from disparate worlds. As the vast expanse of the Black Sea unfurled before them, beckoning with the promise of transit toward the azure waters of the far-off Mediterranean Sea and the cherished Hellenic lands eagerly anticipating their homecoming, Jason pondered the formidable obstacles that surely awaited champions burdened with purloined riches and escorted by an enchantress whose arcane abilities had forged their triumph, but whose very existence would inevitably entangle and muddle every subsequent choice. The return odyssey from Colchis unfolded as a protracted and perilous journey, proving considerably more arduous and fraught with danger than their initial expedition. This increased complexity was exacerbated by the ponderous weight of the Golden Fleece and the supernatural prowess of their enigmatic new associate. While Medea's profound knowledge of winds and oceanic currents proved instrumental in circumventing numerous perils, her mere inclusion upon their vessel engendered unforeseen difficulties as they navigated through territories inhabited by diverse populations who regarded practitioners of sorcery with profound mistrust and palpable dread. The intertwined destinies of Jason and Medea grew more profound during these long, sea-bound months, yet theirs was an intricate nexus combining sincere fondness with utilitarian imperative and reciprocal reliance. She required his stalwart guardianship as they traversed unfamiliar territories where a solitary female would confront perils almost inconceivable. He, in turn, relied upon her arcane wisdom to surmount impediments impervious to ordinary acts of valor. The other Argonauts acclimated to their altered predicament with diverse levels of ease and acquiescence. Some readily recognized the efficacy of Medea's powers and the benefits they conferred during arduous segments of their expedition. Others, however, harbored anxieties regarding the eventual repercussions of associating with an individual whose formidable capabilities derived from practices and customs largely deemed alien and inherently perilous by the majority of Hellenes. Hercules, a cornerstone of their fellowship, had separated from their company during the return voyage, summoned by pressing duties that brooked no delay for the fulfillment of their arduous undertaking. The void created by his departure resonated beyond mere brawn, It signified a diminution of the ethical gravitas that had served as a unifying anchor for their eclectic band of champions amidst prior tribulations. The Mediterranean Sea embraced their return with customary breezes and established oceanic flows. Yet, the Greece they approached was a subtly altered landscape from the land they had left months earlier. The intricate tapestry of political power had undergone significant reweaving, established pacts had fractured or reformed, and the protracted hiatus of 50 renowned champions had engendered fertile ground for opportunistic individuals to further their personal agendas to the detriment of societal equilibrium and equitable governance. Tidings of their triumphant homecoming disseminated with remarkable celerity through the maritime settlements borne on the currents of gossip from fishing skiffs and commercial galleys, whose seafarers had caught sight of the unmistakable profile of the Argo drawing near to Hellenic shores. Upon their eventual arrival at Iolcus, multitudes had congregated to behold the reappearance of champions whose epic journey had already achieved mythic status prior to its ultimate culmination. King Peleus was apprised of Jason's reappearance with a tumultuous blend of conflicting sentiments that he endeavoured strenuously to mask from his counsellors and retinue. The triumphant conclusion of the undertaking signified that his kinsman had legitimately asserted his entitlement to his paternal inheritance, the sovereign seat. However, 2 decades of undisturbed dominion had rendered Peleus decidedly disinclined to relinquish the authority he had grown to regard as his legitimate prerogative. The Golden Fleece itself manifested an even greater awe-inspiring grandeur when exhibited within the regal confines of Iolcus's throne chamber than it had when suspended amidst the nocturnal shadows of the sacred grove where they had surreptitiously acquired it. Its resplendent golden fleece appeared to radiate an inherent luminescence that bathed the whole hall in its ethereal brilliance, while its mere existence evoked an unmistakable aura of celestial sanction that rendered Peleus's tenuous hold on power progressively unsustainable. Jason formally tendered to his uncle the irrefutable evidence of his triumphant endeavour, uttering the solemn pronouncements that laid claim to the sovereign seat, stipulated as recompense for accomplishing the seemingly unattainable. But rather than magnanimously conceding his loss and orchestrating a smooth and amicable transition of authority, Peleus commenced to contrive stratagems to circumvent his solemn pledge. The monarch's obstinate refusal to abdicate his sovereign position precipitated a profound political imbroglio that fractured both the royal retinue and the populace of the city between those who upheld Jason's rightful assertion and those who favoured the perceived security afforded by the prolonged governance of a seasoned ruler. This dilemma was further convoluted by the inclusion of Medea, whose exotic lineage and formidable sorcerous talents instilled apprehension in numerous individuals, notwithstanding her pivotal contribution to the triumph of the expedition. Medea witnessed these intricate political machinations with mounting exasperation and simmering fury, comprehending that her profound relinquishment of all she had ever cherished and held dear could be rendered utterly futile should Peleus manage to cling to authority through artifice and jurisprudential subterfuge. Her chosen remedy for this predicament was, in its essence, unequivocally straightforward and irrevocably conclusive. Leveraging her profound understanding of botanical lore and the intricacies of the human psyche, Medea presented Peleus's unsuspecting daughters with an enticing proposition that appeared to proffer every conceivable wish for their venerable sire. She asserted her mastery of methods capable of reinstating the vitality and robustness to superannuated individuals, thereby enabling them to recover the vigour and dynamism of their halcyon days. The exhibition she orchestrated was meticulously contrived to persuade the royal maidens of her formidable talents, simultaneously shrouding the lethal artifice central to her scheme. Employing a decrepit ram as a living exemplar, she purported to rejuvenate it through a combination of mystic concoctions and ceremonial rites that the princesses could both witness and subsequently emulate. Unbeknownst to the royal siblings, Medea's seeming triumph hinged upon an act of mystical replacement, rather than authentic revitalization. The youthful lamb they observed, ascending from her bubbling cauldron, was not the identical creature that had been placed within, but an entirely distinct animal, while the initial specimen had been surreptitiously removed and concealed amidst the elaborate ceremonial protocols. Persuaded by this elaborate charade, Peleus's offspring consented to replicate the identical process upon their progenitor, firmly convinced they were bestowing upon him the boon of rejuvenated vitality and an extended tenure of existence and sovereignty. Their profound paternal affection and fervent wish for his continued reign transformed them into zealous collaborators in what they perceived as an exemplary demonstration of familial piety. The ceremony they enacted under Medea's subtle direction yielded precisely the result she had meticulously orchestrated from its inception. King Peleus succumbed during the unfolding of the procedure, perished not through arcane revitalization, but rather by protocols meticulously contrived to masquerade as salubrious, while invariably guaranteeing a lethal conclusion. His unsuspecting progeny realized, tragically belatedly, that they had been artfully maneuvered into serving as unwitting conduits of vengeance against their very own patriarch. The unveiling of Medea's elaborate perfidy unleashed a wave of profound horror and deep-seated revulsion, even extending to those factions who had previously championed Jason's rightful ascendance to the throne. The application of sorcery to beguile unsuspecting individuals into perpetrating regicide by proxy transgressed the foundational tenets of equity and rectitude, which the majority of Hellenes regarded as indispensable pillars of an ordered and cultured society. Jason discovered himself ensnared in an untenable predicament, reaping advantage from deeds he found utterly reprehensible. He was acquiring the sovereign seat he had justly merited by methods that irrevocably eroded his ethical mandate for governance. The enchantress whose invaluable aid had facilitated his arduous journey had simultaneously rendered his triumph utterly vacuous by an act of retribution that sullied every aspiration it had been designed to fulfill. The socio-political climate within Iolcus grew insufferable for both Jason and Medea, as popular sentiment coalesced in opposition to them. Notwithstanding the undeniable validity of his entitlement and the righteousness of dislodging Pelias from his usurped authority, they found themselves compelled to relinquish the regal seat Jason had secured through extraordinary valour, thereby becoming pariahs from the very dominion the epic quest had been meticulously designed to recover. Their ensuing peregrinations ultimately led them to the city of Corinth, where they forged a novel existence founded upon Jason's renown as a celebrated hero and the distinguished captain of the legendary Argonauts. Over the course of numerous years their lives unfolded in a manner of tranquillity and affluence, nurturing their progeny and acclimatizing to conditions vastly divergent from the tumultuous escapades and formidable trials that had initially united them. Nevertheless, the intrinsic friction within their union, stemming from disparities in lineage, cultural heritage, and ethical perspectives, ultimately engendered discord that proved impervious to resolution by either reciprocal fondness or the collective recollections of previous joint endeavours. The matrimonial bond, initially forged as an alliance between a valiant champion and a powerful enchantress, progressively devolved into a wellspring of anguish and disillusionment for each individual involved. The ultimate rupture materialized when Jason resolved to take a Corinthian princess as his bride, motivated by a desire for political leverage and societal integration that his exotic spouse was inherently incapable of furnishing. His forsaking of Medea was simultaneously a pragmatic maneuver and an act of profound inequity, reciprocating her immense sacrifices and invaluable aid with a perfidious act that annihilated the very foundations she had painstakingly constructed during their shared years. Medea's reaction to this profound treachery was, in her inimitable fashion, utterly radical and enduringly ruinous. Her meticulously crafted retribution against Jason targeted the very core of his most cherished aspirations and possessions, thereby guaranteeing that his relentless quest for societal esteem and political ascendancy would yield him naught but profound sorrow and perpetual remorse for the entirety of his remaining days. The legendary Argonauts, in due course, scattered to their respective abodes and sundry commitments, bearing with them indelible recollections of collective exploits that had rigorously challenged their fortitude, sagacity, and allegiance, thereby profoundly influencing their comprehension of valour and camaraderie. Their personal destinies diverged considerably, yet each had been irrevocably transformed by their involvement in an expedition that had indeed accomplished its proclaimed objectives, while simultaneously illuminating the intricate ethical facets inherent in acts of heroism. Jason's twilight years were often overshadowed by a profound sense of solitude and an intense contemplation of the pivotal decisions that had ultimately bestowed upon him considerable renown but scant personal contentment, significant triumph, yet little genuine fulfillment. The fabled golden fleece, a magnificent artifact securely enshrined within sacred temples where it garnered the appropriate reverence and veneration, persisted as an enduring emblem of an extraordinary accomplishment. However, this hard-won victory had come at a series of profound personal expenses, the true magnitude of which he had utterly failed to foresee or comprehend when his legendary quest had first commenced in the flush of youthful ambition. As individuals prepare to embrace slumber at the close of a day, a quiet solace may perhaps be discovered in acknowledging the remarkable persistence with which these ancient narratives continue to resonate within the most introspective and unassuming moments of contemporary existence. The perpetual conflicts between unchecked ambition and profound wisdom, between the pressing urgency of individual desires and the overarching imperatives of communal responsibilities, retain their poignant relevance with an intensity no less potent now than they were during the epoch of Jason. Humanity perpetually confronts difficult choices, often situated between the allure of immediate gratification and the genuine necessities of life, or between transient advantages and the far-reaching, often unforeseen, long-term ramifications. The enduring archetype of the hero's journey serves as a potent reminder that authentic success frequently demands not merely unwavering courage and resolute determination, but critically the perspicacity to grasp the comprehensive implications of one's actions and the inherent humility required to embrace assistance from entirely unexpected quarters. Furthermore, the missteps and errors chronicled within these sagas impart a crucial lesson. Even the noblest of intentions can regrettably culminate in tragic outcomes when one neglects to adequately consider the intricate needs and profound sentiments of others. Within the intricate tapestry of everyday human existence, individuals may not be confronted by the formidable spectres of bronze bulls or the menacing vigilance of sleepless dragons. Yet they invariably encounter an array of challenges that rigorously test the very essence of their character, in ways that are equally, if not more, profound and significant. The profound patience demanded to genuinely listen to disparate viewpoints, the inherent courage necessary to forthrightly acknowledge one's own errors, and the sagacious wisdom to discern when a judicious compromise ultimately benefits all parties more effectively than a decisive victory. These qualities stand as the contemporary analogues of ancient heroic virtues. Moreover, and perhaps of paramount importance, these venerable tales consistently impress upon us the fundamental truth that no individual achieves truly great endeavours in absolute isolation. Jason's celebrated triumph was undeniably facilitated by the invaluable assistance he garnered from a diverse network of allies, including loyal companions, insightful mentors, and even former adversaries who, through a shared purpose, chose to lend their support to his formidable cause. In our increasingly intricate and interconnected global society, this vital lesson takes on an even greater resonance, underscoring the imperative for collective action and cooperation across the multifaceted divides of culture, established tradition, and deeply held beliefs. Therefore, as an individual gently surrenders to the embrace of sleep, it is beneficial to allow these gentle and profound lessons to permeate the consciousness, settling within the mind like the comforting warmth of soft blankets on a crisp, cool evening. The dawn of a new day will assuredly usher in its own distinct set of trials and promising opportunities. Yet tonight, enveloped in the tranquil stillness of the darkness, one can find profound repose in the timeless understanding that wisdom, much like ancient venerable trees, cultivates its strength and breadth slowly and steadily over time, and that true comprehension deepens incrementally with each narrative one permits oneself to genuinely absorb and contemplate.